Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Madera City Council and special meeting of the Madera City Council as successor agency to the former Madera Redevelopment Agency. Today is Wednesday, January 19th, 2022. It is now 6 p.m. The council chambers will be open to the public. This meeting will also be available for public viewing and participation through Zoom. Members of the public may also observe the live stream meeting on the city's website at www.madera.gov/live. Members of the public may comment on agenda items at the meeting or remotely through an electronic media via phone by dialing 669-900-6833, enter ID 873-9769-9150. Hashtag. Comments will also be accepted via email at citycouncilpubliccomment@madera.gov or by regular mail at 205 West 4th Street, Madera, California 93637. The city will observe the Madera County Public Health Department recommendations. This may limit seating in the council chamber. However, the city will have seating available in the foyer. All persons visiting city facilities shall observe health and public protocols. This meeting is also being conducted by teleconference at the following locations. Myself, Mayor Santos Garcia, is at 413 South 8th Street, Madera, California, 93638. Mayor Pro Tem Anita Evans is at 1218 East Cleveland Avenue, space number 165, also in Madera. And Council Member CC Gallegos is at 1177 Norwegian, Modesto, California, 95350. Mayor Garcia, Mayor Pro Tem Evans, and Council Member Gallegos will participate via the listed teleconference locations. The teleconference locations are open to the public, and any member of the public has an opportunity to address the City Council from the teleconference location in the same manner as if that person had attended the meeting at City Hall. The City Council will control the conduct of the meeting and determine the appropriate order on public comments from the teleconference location. All votes during the teleconference meeting will be by roll call. This meeting is now called to order. Alicia, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Garcia?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Evans?
Here.
Councilmember Gallegos?
Here.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Here.
Councilmember Montes?
Here.
Councilmember Mejia?
Here.
And Councilmember Villegas?
Here.
Thank you. Mayor, you're on mute. Please unmute.
Thank you very much. Would you all please rise for the invocation now by Pastor Mark Unger, First Baptist Church.
Good evening, everybody. It's a privilege to be here with you, and God bless each one. Lord Jesus, you have written these words stating, unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. Unless the Lord guards the city, the watchman keeps awake in vain. Help us to remember in this meeting, both those who are here in person and those who are online, that this house belongs to you, that this city belongs to you, that these people belong to you. The very air we breathe and the gravity that holds us down belongs to you. And may these people, our mayor and our city council people, others in administration here at the city, make appropriate decisions that would be in line with your will for the people of the fine city of Madera. You have also written that the king's heart is like channels of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he wishes. Well, there's no king here online. There's no king here in the chamber, but there's leadership. And if you can turn the heart of a king, then you can turn the heart of leaders. And I pray that these leaders would so inspect the issues and would so decide on issues as to be free of partisan politics and truly do what is in the best interests of the people of the city of Madera. I have a police officer standing to my left who represents the entire Madera PD. And every one of us in this room and online are so thankful for him, so thankful for the Madera PD and others who serve our city. We ask you to keep them safe, as while we are in bed this evening sleeping in peace, they're out making sure that they uphold the peace. We praise you for each one and for what you're about to do here this evening, that it may bring honor and glory to you. Respecting all faiths, I pray in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Police Chief, would you please us lead the Pledge of Allegiance? Chief Lawson?
Yes, Mayor. Please face the flag. Ready? Salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor Unger, and thank you, Chief Lawson. We will now move on to the approval of the agenda. We'll ask my colleagues if you have any changes or additions to the agenda. Seeing none, hearing none, I will now ask for a motion from my colleagues.
Motion to approve. So moved to approve agenda as presented.
Second.
I heard Councilwoman Evans. Who is the second?
Councilmember
Rodriguez. Motion to approve the agenda by Councilwoman Evans, seconded by Councilmember Rodriguez. Alicia, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Gallegos,
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez,
Yes.
Councilmember Montes,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Evans,
Yes.
Councilmember Mejia,
Yes.
Councilmember Villegas,
Yes.
and Mayor Garcia.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. We will now move on to public comment. The first 15 minutes of the meeting are reserved for members of the public to address the council on items which are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council. Speakers shall be limited to 3 minutes. Speakers will be asked but are not required to identify themselves and state the subject of their comments. If the subject is an item on the agenda, the mayor has the option of asking the speaker to hold the comment until that item is called. Comments on items listed as a public hearing on the agenda should be held until the hearing is opened. The council is prohibited by law from taking any action on matters discussed that are not on the agenda, and no adverse conclusion should be drawn if the council does not respond to public comment at this time. Alicia, do we have any public comment today?
I have no written public comment, Mayor. Mark, do we have anyone on Zoom?
There's no one on Zoom.
And do we have anyone in the council chambers?
At this time, it does not appear like we have anyone in the council chambers.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. For that, Alicia, I will now close public comment. I do not see any written communications. We will now move on to presentations. The first item is the Department of Public Health update on COVID-19. Report by Madera County Public Health Department. I believe, Sarah, are you in the room?
I'm here.
Hello and welcome.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. It is an interesting time in public health, and I'm going to try and share my screen. Let's see if this works. Are you able to see the graph on the slideshow?
Yeah.
Great. So I really wanted to be able to show this to everyone in the meeting today so that people can grasp how different this surge is from other surges. In fact, all 4 surges that we've experienced in COVID are very distinct. The first, of course, happened in the summer of 2020. You can see that it followed a very traditional curve with it topping out at about 40 cases per 100,000 population. Then we had the surge in the wintertime, which looked a little bit different and certainly reached a different peak at around 90 cases per 100,000 as a daily case rate. Then you can see the surge that happened that was Delta, beginning about in August of 2021 and proceeding in a very slow leveling off through the end of December. This was a much longer, more sustained surge, and we expected that from the Delta variant because of the severity of cases that we saw. It really did linger for a longer period of time, and that maxed out at about 50 cases per 100,000 on our case rate. And then at the end here, we can see Omicron. Now, I just want to point out that the tail that you see at the end there is related to the lag time. It's not actually going down. It's because the lag, just ignore the tail. So we are still on the upswing, and we are at a case rate of 150. And we're still going up. We still have an increase in number of cases. It's starting to slow, but it is not going down as of yet. And we expect it'll continue to go up for another week or two. We are seeing other counties that entered about 2 weeks ahead of us. They're starting to have it level off and maybe come down. We're not seeing the severity of cases that we did in previous surges. At the same time, when you have a smaller percentage of people that have severe cases, but a lot more people getting sick, you still end up with a number of severe cases that are ending up in the hospital. So we are seeing our hospitals overwhelmed, especially in Fresno. Madera Community Hospital is faring okay because the surge capacity beds that were provided towards the end of Delta were sustained by the state. And so they have extra capacity in the ICU in Madera Community Hospital. So they haven't been completely overwhelmed at this point. But again, they're dealing with surge capacity, not regular capacity of the hospital. Much of the issues that we're experiencing are issues that probably seem very familiar to most of the people in the room on Zoom, and that is staffing shortages. So the same labor issues that are being seen in city government, potentially, and other businesses in Madera is being felt by public health. It's being felt by our hospital. And that's actually the bigger issue, is that so many people are out sick. They are out sick for a shorter period of time. The isolation and quarantine guidance was adjusted to allow for vaccinated people to test and return to work on day 5. There are 2 problems with this. The first is our testing resources are completely overwhelmed. There are so many people because of the cases that need testing and want testing that are not able to access them. The state resources to be able to expand testing are also experiencing the labor shortages that everyone else is. And so we do expect that OptumServe testing will be expanded as soon as that staffing becomes available. We also expect that testing will be focused more on people who have symptoms and less on people who are testing day 5 to try and get back to work. Because the second thing that we're seeing with the 5-day isolation possibility is that it's not working out very well. People are still, even if their symptoms are resolving and it's a rapid test that's not as sensitive, they're still testing positive at day 5. Day 7 or 8 is actually working out to be better because if you aren't able to test out at day 5, then usually you're having to wait until day 10. So the first message is, if people are trying to test out of isolation because they're feeling better, they want to return to work, we do recommend that you wait until day 7 at this point. Guidance is, if you can test at day 5 and test negative, you can go back to work, and that's great. But we are seeing a real waste of resources by lots of people testing at day 5 and they're still coming back positives. Doesn't really do anything for them to get back to work. And so many people want tests. The second recommendation is, if you're not able to access a test, it's okay. Assume you're positive. Stay home. for at minimum 7 to 8 days since onset of symptoms, and your symptoms are completely resolved. And then if you're able to test and test negative, then you can come out of isolation at that point. The other thing that people can do is if you have a home test, many people have received home tests through their employer. We received a small allocation, and it was really designed to meet gaps for people with access issues due to transportation and other issues. Low wage workers in high risk situations is where we did our most of our distribution through our community-based organizations and our churches as well. If people have those, they can use them. But I would also recommend using our OptumServe site if it's not a result that you need right away, and kind of utilizing our resources strategically, because OptumServe, while it might take you a couple days to get your results, if you have symptoms in your home anyway, then that's probably a good option. Whereas if you're asymptomatic and you're trying to get back to work, that's when you use that rapid test. So the other resource for those home tests is the feds have made available 4 home tests per physical address, so per household, which I know in Madera County is an inequity, and I've pointed that out to our state partners. Hopefully, as we get distribution of more state provided home tests, we will get a larger quantity due to that inequity, because we have households that are larger than 4 members. But we do encourage people right away to go and order your test as early as possible, because then maybe the shipping will be faster to you. And you can go to covidtest.gov to get that, order those tests for your family. It says it's not going to ship for 7 to 12 days, and then obviously the time to get to you. So a couple weeks to get those. Better to order them now and have them on hand later on. I'm available for any questions.
Do any of my colleagues have any questions for Sarah tonight? You do? You want to raise your hand? I do not see any at this time. Alicia, do you see any hand raised?
No, Mayor, I do not.
Sarah, I want to thank you for coming and giving us an update on COVID. As always, very educational. I want to thank you very much. And I want to wish you a happy new year, and you have a good evening.
Thank you. Good to be with you. Good
Thank
night.
you. Adios. We will now move on to a proclamation recognizing January as Human Trafficking Awareness and Prevention Month. I believe CAPMC, I don't see you on the list, Maddie. Are you in the house, or is a representative from CAPMC in the house?
Maddie is here, Mayor. She's
Okay, thank you very much. Maddie, if you could step up to the podium. And anyone else that wishes you to join you from CAPMC.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Maddie. I can't see the podium at this time, so I'm just gonna think that you're there by yourself. If not, you can identify, after I read the proclamation, you can identify the person with you. This is from the Proclamation Human Trafficking Awareness and Prevention Month. This is City of Madera, State of California, February 2022. Whereas human trafficking is a nationwide public health and civil rights crisis, victims and survivors are everywhere in society, with our community being no exception. And whereas this horrific crime is claiming millions of victims worldwide, it exists in the United States and our community. It denies human dignity and freedom and fuels organized crime, often in the form of sexual exploitation, forced labor, involuntary servitude, and death bondage. And so I'm going to skip now to the whereas Human Trafficking Prevention and Awareness Month provides an excellent opportunity for citizens in our community to learn more about identifying victims, because prevention education is crucial in eradicating human trafficking. And whereas the City of Madera joins CAPMC Victim Services in striving to become a place where human trafficking does not exist, where people have opportunities available to them, and where all people are treated as fully human and worthy of a supported community. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Santos Garcia, Mayor of the City of Madera, and on behalf of the entire City Council, do hereby proclaim January in the City of Madera as Human Trafficking Prevention and Awareness Month, signed this 19th day of January, 2022. Maddie, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. Maddie Mendez, Community Action Partnership of Madera County, joined with Jennifer Coronado. She is our program manager, and Walter Perez. He is an advocate, and you see him at many events throughout the community. Yes, January is Human Trafficking Month, and we appreciate the council providing us a proclamation to bring awareness. But we also want to say thank you for your continued support. Human trafficking was honored by Senator Caballero's presentation to Olive Foundation recently, and we just need to make sure that we are serving our community, providing those services. And I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer and Walter to say a few comments.
Again, thank you, Mayor and council members, for assisting us on bringing awareness to our city. We do see it, not as high as other neighboring counties, but I would say the last year we did assist 7 people due to sex trafficking. So it is in our community. I'll let Walter talk about labor trafficking because he is our underserved advocate. And for those that need assistance, because I would say labor trafficking is one thing we do not see, but we know it's around. And I'll let Walter talk about that.
Yes, thank you to all council members and mayor. As Jennifer did mention, that there is labor trafficking going on, and the issue is identifying it, and then these victims also identifying themselves as being labor trafficked. So our plan is to provide more prevention and awareness. Like Maddie mentioned, I am at almost every event providing information on how to access services, and we do plan on providing more community awareness so that way we can provide services to those that are being trafficked, whether that be human traffic, sexual exploitation, or labor trafficking. So thank you again, once again.
To contact us, please call 559-661-1000. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maddie. Have a good evening. We will now move on to the next item, which is introductions. I believe Mr. Forestier, do you have this item?
Yes, sir.
Number 1.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem. Good evening, council members. Happy New Year. I want to introduce Marcella Zuniga as our new grants administrator. She brings with her a bachelor's degree in liberal studies and a master's degree in organization leadership. She's served in the Madera community in different capacities over the last 15 years in the areas of public service, including housing, grants, monitoring, and development, and community development. Without further ado, Marcella.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Thank you for having me here tonight. Thank you, Anthony. As he mentioned, I do have experience in serving our community over the past 15 years. My experience ranges from the housing industry, social service, education, and ultimately I last served with First Five Madera County for a period of over 5 years, where I was overseeing grants to our community. I've partnered with many agencies throughout the course of that time frame, from education, CAPMC, the city, numerous different agencies. In my capacity right now as grants administrator, I am both excited and grateful to serve in this capacity. Given my experience and working with the community, I think it's a great opportunity, and I'm really excited to serve our community through the city. So thank you.
Thank you, and welcome aboard.
Thank you.
We will now move on to item A, workshop. Item A1, update on water, sewer, storm drainage, and solid waste rate studies. Recommendation, no action required. Report by Mr. Forestier again.
Good evening, Council. Yeah, I'm going to turn it over to Arnaldo, City Manager, to do a small presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council, Arnoldo Rodriguez, City Manager. You can just briefly give me a second here so I can share my screen. And I believe council can see my screen at this point.
Yes.
Thank you very much. The item before you is a workshop. No action is being requested of council this evening. However, if council wants to provide direction, that's council's prerogative. Council may recall back in August, city staff did have a workshop initially for sewer and water rates specifically. And then on December 15th, we had a follow-up workshop where we discussed sewer, water, drainage, waste, solid waste, and street sweeping. The city, a while back, a little bit over a year ago, the city did publish a request for proposals where we received multiple proposals. At the time, NBS was contracted. NBS is here this evening. We have their consulting team comprised of Jordan, Greg, and Alan, and from the city team, Vicky Crow's been the city's project manager. On top of that, we did have outside counsel that specializes on water rates, and they have reviewed the water study. So this is a Proposition 218 project or process. There are 4 studies. Collectively, we're simply referring to them as a study, but again, they are 4 distinct studies. Simply for context here, the city at the same time, we have a parallel process happening that's trailing this process for the Development Impact Fee Program. The rate studies are for existing facilities that are paid for and serve the existing community. The Development Impact Fee Program is for new construction and new development. As we're going through this, one of the things that staff and the consultant team is continually going back and sharpening our pencils on is to make sure that new development pays its way, and at the same time that we're not overburdening the existing taxpayers. So it's definitely a balancing act in terms of who pays for what. So this evening, we're going to be recapping the studies, and again, no formal action is being requested. Another item worth highlighting is the city is receiving roughly $23 million of American Rescue Plan Act funds. Different cities are doing different things with those funds. Here at the city of Madera, City Council has directed staff to allocate 100% of those funds towards public infrastructure. So with that, the rate studies do include the $6 million for the water and $17 million for wastewater. That's all planned to go for capital. If council had not done that, we would be experiencing significant increases in sewer and water rates. However, because council did designate those funds, that's going to mitigate some increases. With that being said, some increases are anticipated. Before we dive into the existing study, which NBS is going to present, I do want to provide some context in terms of how we got here. The current rate study that the city is currently operating in under was prepared in 2015. And back in 2015, that study had determined that the water fund specifically was going to be short by $2 million. It also assumed that the city was going to take on $24 million of debt in 2019 and 2020. Some of that debt was going to be for the water tank. This is a relatively large water tank. The tank itself is roughly 9 million, but for the land and all the infrastructure around it, it goes up to close to $20 million. At the time, again, the city had planned to build that water tank. On top of that, there was an operating deficit of 540,000. The other thing worth noting, and this is a key item, at the time, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act was not adopted by the state. So this new rate study does take into account SGMA and the different things we have to do in order to comply with the state law. So again, that's a new state law. The new study takes it into account. A couple of other things that the existing rate study and some of the deficiencies that it has, and that's not to say that it's completely wrong, but they're worth pointing out. In 2017, the city did have significant salary increases. The rate study that we're operating under had not anticipated those. On top of that, there were significant increases in both parts and supplies in 2017. The rate study did not anticipate that. Sometimes it's very difficult to anticipate expenses. One thing that we tried doing as part of this rate study, we tried taking that into account and inflation at the same time, which we'll get into in a couple of slides. At the same time, again, the assumed water tank, or the study assumed that the water tank would be paid for partially with the reserves, and then the city would bond. And that was the previous slide, the $24 million. We haven't bonded for it because we haven't paid for it. However, because of some of the items, the increases in both salaries and parts and supplies and some other things that have happened Sigma, some of the capital projects that were initially planned in the existing rate study were not complete. However, we still have to do them. So what's happening, some of those capital projects are being pushed into this rate study. So as Chief Lawson likes to say, we're paying for our father's sins. So it wasn't done. We have to do it. So what happens is those projects, they simply just don't go away. They're still required. However, with that being said, we have new projects that have to be done. So that's all taken into account as part of this rate study. The other item that the study does not take into account potential grants that we may obtain. We are aggressively working with the state to try to obtain some grants. We have not been, besides the $23 million, we have not received notice that we're eligible for additional grants, but staff is aggressively working towards that. We're currently working for the state to annex the Parkwood water system, which is currently in the county, and some dollars would be tied to that. The other item that the study assumes is a 3% general inflation annually. And it also assumes that the water supply, salaries, benefits, fuel, and electricity will increase 5% annually. So in terms of the water study, it largely considers two options. One is a uniform rate, and then the two-tier system. And we'll have NBS go over both of those. The city currently has a three-tier system. So regardless of what option, or the two options that staff is recommending is either the uniform or the two-tier system, council could obviously say that you like the three-tier system and we could go back, or you can identify a different type of system. The other thing is that the rate study, it's assuming that the majority of the water tank now would be paid for with reserves. Whereas in the past, it was assumed reserves plus a loan or a bond. This time we're assuming that we're going to try to pay for it with reserves. The promising news, and NBS will go into the details, but the key takeaway from this is that the rate study is assuming a one-time increase of 3% for water rates for the next 5 years. And that 3% would go into effect after adoption, if that's the direction of council. In terms of wastewater, very similar to the water. Not all of the projects anticipated in 2015 were completed. Some of those reasons is that the city in 2018 had an unanticipated large expense or large repair that was that quite frankly was I'm not sure if I would call it an emergency, but it was urgent. One of the tanks had failed at the wastewater treatment plant, or it was failing, and that was not anticipated. So the city used some of the other capital program dollars, $4 million for that repair. The other item that was not anticipated is the Pecan Avenue repair that we're currently working on. That's $8 million. Unfortunately, for a while there, we thought we had secured $3.5 million from Congress. However, as council is aware, Congress tabled the American Infrastructure Plan, and the city is not going to be receiving those funds anymore. Because of that, some of the capital projects that were planned in the current program were not developed. But again, similar to water, we still have to build those out. And so those are included as part of this program. With that being said, if no adjustments are made, the wastewater account would be depleted, and it would have a deficit of roughly $900,000 by 2026. With that being said, council again has allocated $17 million of American Rescue Plan, that's grant funding that the city received from the federal government last year. We're going to allocate 100% of that to the wastewater treatment plant or to the sewer system. However, there's more modest increases proposed as part of the wastewater system, It would be 5% annually for 5 consecutive years. In terms of drainage, this is a slight fluid situation, and that's no pun intended. Currently, since 1992, the city has not increased drainage fees. It's $2 a house right now. The study proposes an 8% increase. So in year one, it would go to $2.81 and thereafter 8%. The reason I say we continue to examine the studies, there's a couple of moving parts to this study. And while council had the draft study that was provided to council on Friday, there's a couple of other pieces that we're still exploring. We believe there's a capital project that we may want to include in that to address some localized flooding in Northeast Madera. Again, we're still looking at that. And once the study's final, we'll come back to council. So solid waste is probably the most challenging of the various items, specifically because of Senate Bill 1383 that council is very well aware of. We are in ongoing discussions with MV, come with Mid-Valley to talk about the rates. It's a fluid situation. The state's anticipating a 35% increase. We're very hopeful that it's going to be substantially less. However, with that's still a work in progress. I do think it's worth noting that the city transfers out of the solid waste division, the city transfers roughly $600,000 to other departments. 21,000 to the police, 398,000 to streets, 44,000 to graffiti abatement, 19 to code enforcement, and 120,000 to parks. The parks, it does not go to park programming. Rather, what it does, the parks department manages the tree trimming along the streets. So the city gets the money and we trim the trees that overhang the public right of way, which allows the vehicles to travel safely through the streets. If not, the trees would be torn apart. That's the $120,000. And that's the contract that council approved a while back with West Coast Arborist. For streets, I'm definitely not an engineer, and Keith can speak to this, but in a nutshell, most cars don't cause a tremendous amount of traffic to our localized streets. However, heavy equipment does. Some of the most heavy equipment that travels on those roads are the trash trucks, and they're extremely heavy. So as they're going through, we use some of those funds to go back and repair the potholes. And this study assumes that this practice will continue. The street sweeping, it's embedded as part of the solid waste study. For both the council and the community, it begins on page 10 of the solid waste study. The city currently conducts street sweeping. Right now, it's based on how much frontage you have. So if you live on a corner lot, you're probably going to pay a little bit more. It's a formula. Rather than go with that approach, which is a bit more challenging to administer, the study proposes to go to a flat fee. Today, the city does not collect adequate funds. We're short today $261,000 a year. That's made up through the general fund and a couple of other pots of money. If the council were to adopt the study at a future date, it would make that account whole. So again, right now, the city does not collect adequate funds for street sweeping. So with that being said, staff is here in case I got ahead of my skis a little bit or if I misstated anything. But with that, I'm going to turn it back over to the MBS team, and they will continue on some of the items. I know at the last meeting, council did have a couple of questions about a few different scenarios. I attempted to address some of those during my presentation, and MBS will be talking about some of the others. One thing to note is that I believe it was Councilwoman Gallegos at the last meeting had specifically indicated about a 4-inch line. Just to give some context on water, most of the study alludes to a 1-inch line. The vast majority of homes in the city have a 1-inch line. Actually, it's in excess of 12,000. There are literally 3 homes in the entire city that have a line smaller than 1 inch. One of them, I think 2 of them have 3/4 inch. One of them has a 5/8 inch. The vast majority are 1-inch lines. If you go to a 2-inch line, that's not that you're doubling the water capacity. It's actually 3.2 times the amount of water that a 1-inch line. If you go to an 8-inch line, it's not 8 times more, it's 32 times more. So it's not simply the multiplier effect. And there's a chart in the report on the water study, I believe it's on around page 11 or 12, that addresses that. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to the MBS team unless council has any questions for me specifically. So with
I
that,
think it would be advantageous to have continue on the presentation, and then we'll save the questions to the end.
thank you, Mayor.
Good evening. This is Alan High Street with NBS. You've seen me a few other times. So let's move forward. What I wanted to do real quick was touch bases with where we are now in the process of these rate studies. Again, briefly touch on the Prop 218 background, and then go through the utilities one by one. And I'm going to do the water, sewer, and storm drainage utilities, and Greg Klumpner from our shop will do the solid waste. And then we'll kind of end up with next steps. So where we're at in the process, so as Arnaldo talked about, we were retained to review and update the rates. We held our first workshop in August, and there we looked at just the water, sewer, and storm drainage. At that time, we were still trying to figure out some of the costs that would be going into the solid waste, and so we didn't cover that there. So the first time you heard about the solid waste rates was really last December, and we covered all 4 utilities in that workshop. And now we're at workshop number 3. But what we'd like to do, assuming we've answered your questions today, is the next session that we get together, hopefully next month, we'll ask the council to approve the start of the Prop 218 process. And I'll go over it, what that process is. So everybody refers to Prop 218. That was essentially a process that's been put in place and been in place now several years. And basically what they're trying to do was they were trying to close some of the loopholes of the old Prop 13, and they felt that enterprise rates needed to be governed a little bit. So this law came into place, and basically it limits the authority of the local government to impose taxes, assessments, fees, and charges. And so basically it says you have to vote on it. Charges are limited to the cost of providing the service and may not be imposed for general governmental services available to the public. Okay, because those essentially then act more like a tax. Now, in Prop 218, water, sewer, and solid waste utilities are treated a little bit different, and that vote is actually a protest vote. So there has to be protests that are 50% plus one of the accounts. So you'd have to have all the accounts vote and protest it to stop a rate increase. Now, storm drainage requires an affirmative vote because it's treated more like a property type of tax. And there you'd need votes in favor of the increase and more votes than opposed. So that's a little bit harder to pass. Now, in terms of the approach, in all of our studies, we kind of do a 3-step process. And first we look at the financial plan, and we look at what are our costs, what are our current revenues, and what are our non-rate revenues, and we determine what we have to generate. Once we know what we need to generate, we look at a cost to service where we proportion those costs to the users that drive those costs, and we do that in compliance with industry standards. And then once we know that the costs have been allocated fairly to customer classes, then we look at what's the best rate structure to bring that money in. Now, what we try to do is, when we do this, is follow industry standards. And that's why for the water study, it's based on the American Water Works Association M1 manual. And for wastewater, it's the Water Environment Federation manual. So what you want to do when you have to defend these rates, you want an approach that's a standard approach that's used across the industry. And so what you've seen here is we've used industry standards as we go through. And if you read the reports, it has more detail on actually those standards. Now, when we look at rate design goals, one, we got to make sure the rates follow cost of service, and that means they need to be equitable and not discriminating on any customer class. But they also have to be easy to administer, and people need to understand what those charges are. And then, of course, you also need to provide revenue stability. In some cases, that revenue stability can be obtained by having more of your revenue picked up by a fixed charge versus some type of variable or volumetric charge. So let's go more specifically into the water rates. So starting with the financial plan there, when we looked at the cost to be recovered, we looked at the operating costs, and I'll probably use the term O&M, that's operations and maintenance. We looked at debt service, any planned pay-as-you-go capital projects, that means that you're going to use money you have on hand to pay for it, and then making sure you have a reserve fund balance. Now, in this particular case, as described earlier, we had, besides using some reserves we have on hand in water, we also got $6 million from the rescue plan. So we applied $6 million there. And also mentioned, they're still working on additional grant funding, but that additional grant funding has not been assumed here. Right now, anything we get additionally would either pay for additional capital improvements or potentially could be used down the road to, again, keep rates down where they need to be. We'll use the term rate revenue requirements, and that's basically looking at those costs we talked about before, the O&M, the debt service, and the capital. And then we subtract off any non-rate revenues you get, which might be licenses or fines or application fees, those types of things that aren't a user charge per se. Those are subtracted off. And what's left is the amount you got to generate from your rates. Now, if we look at this chart here, this has the fiscal years across the bottom and the dollars that we need there. And what we're looking at is the blue in each of the columns. The blue is your O&M. That yellow bar is debt service. And then the green is rate funded capital expenses. So you can see, for example, in year 22, 23, there's a huge amount of capital that's going to be put in place there. And then looking at the lines, the solid black line going across is what our revenues would be under existing rates. The dotted red line would be revenues under the adjusted rates. You can see that's really not much difference. And the gray just shows what revenues would had to have been if we didn't get the American Rescue Plan Act dollars. So you can see, again, from this graph, a large amount of capital anticipated next fiscal year. And again, that's being paid for by rescue plan money. And actually, you do have some reserves there that you're going to pull in to get those things funded. And again, because you had some of those reserves in the Rescue Plan Act, you can kind of avoid debt service. Now, we looked at two options for the water rates. The first one was to look at a uniform rate. And the second was looking at tiered rates. Now, from the time the last study was done till now, there's been a lot of lawsuits regarding tiered rates. The San Juan Capistrano court case in 2015 essentially challenged how rates or tiered rates were set and the cost of service for each tier. And essentially, those couldn't be justified by San Juan Capistrano. And that makes sense. A lot of tiered rates at that time were really set up to try to encourage conservation. And so they were arbitrarily set to be some pretty high tiers to encourage that conservation. And that was one of the things that actually the state encouraged from the water resources side of the house. Well, the problem is from the lawsuit side, that's a challenge. So quite frankly, you have a 3-tier system now. When we looked at your costs, we could justify a 2-tiered rate. And when we get into the rates in the next sheet, you'll see that actually there's not much of a difference in the rates. So let's jump to what the rates are. In this table, on the top half of the sheet, you can see the fixed meter charges, and you can see in the kind of the yellow bar what your current rates are, and then going to the right, the annual proposed rates. I will note that last session that we had, there were some questions on the 8-inch meter there and why that is dropping compared to some of the others. You have 3 8-inch meters, but they're actually compound meters versus turbine meters. And the hydraulic capacity is lower for compound meters than turbine meters. And the old study had been based on turbine meters. So actually correcting for the right type of meter and lowering the hydraulic capacity, their proportional share actually drops. Now, for the commodity charge, if we looked at where we're at now, you have for the non-residential, $2.41 per 100 cubic feet, and it would actually drop to $2.16 going forward. And if we stuck with option 1, a residential uniform rate, that would be the $2.16 would apply to everybody, and there would be no tiers. Now, if you looked at option 2, putting tiered rates in place, if the tiers you have now, the $1.93, the $2.40, and $3.68, that would be replaced by the first tier at $1.98 and the last tier at $2.39. And there would not be a third tier. We couldn't justify that from the cost. So when you look at it, for those folks that use very little water, if you wanted tier rates, that would make a slight difference to those folks. And again, not a big difference. So that's probably one of the biggest changes in terms of rates moving forward. Now, if we look at your water rates over the last decade, and we kind of just cruised along there, this chart has the years on the bottom, and then the blue part represents a fixed portion of the rates, and the green is the variable portion of the volumetric charges for a 1-inch meter with using 1,500 cubic feet. And you can see how that has roughly the last few years stayed the same, been pretty flat. And at the very end, we just looked at, all right, what is our proposed tier going to be, that average rate on the right-hand side? What is it proposed with the uniform rate? And looking back, what would it have been with just an annual CPI adjustment? And so you can see there's not much change in those rates. Now, the next graph I'm going to show you has got a lot more detail. And in this case, what we have here across the bottom, you can see that is 100 cubic feet across the bottom per month. So it's monthly water consumption. So you can see the 5, 8, 15. Now the average winter monthly bill, the average winter use is 800 cubic feet. The annual average is 1,500 cubic feet. In the summer, the average is 22. Now, if you look at the different columns there, the first column in the blue is your current rate. The yellow one right next to it is what your rate would have been with no Rescue Plan Act, with a tiered rate. The striped yellow is no Rescue Plan Act, but a uniform rate. And then the two green ones, the striped green is where you would be with the American Rescue Plan tiered, and the other one uniform. So you can see overall, there's not a lot of difference, between tiered and uniform. You get that. And you can also see that it was pretty significant in terms of what the Rescue Plan Act did in terms of lowering that bill. So, as you would expect, if you had a uniform rate, the folks that use a lot more water, as you get to the right side, they start benefiting from a uniform rate. Where if you go to the left-hand side, if you use less than average, then you get a slight difference. But again, we're not talking huge differences there. When you compare, at 800 cubic feet, for example, the difference between the two approaches is 38.98 and 40.42 on an average bill. So, I'm not sure we sent a conservation measure there, or a signal there. Now, if we kind of look to see how we compare with other communities, again, this is the same chart as before. You have, you can see you're toward the right-hand side of just some of the folks we have here, but still pretty reasonable compared to your neighbors. Not much difference there. Don't really know the background on why Clovis or Tulare are a little bit lower, but it kind of just gives you an idea of where you stick with your neighbors. So now I'm going to jump to the sewer rates. And in again, the financial plan, kind of the same thing, looking at the O&M, the debt service, and any capital we wanted to pay for. Now, in this case, and especially because there weren't a lot of reserve funds in the sewer side, we applied 16 million of the ARPR funds to the. Oh.
Councilmember Rodriguez has a question, Mayor.
Oh, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, I know that.
Mr. Rodriguez, would you please wait till the end of the presentation so that we don't chop up their presentation? I apologize, it just causes an inconvenience for you, but.
You know what, I feel that because we're taking these particular enterprise funds one at a time, I think it'd be appropriate for us to ask the questions now, if I can, only because this is a pretty big study here. And I think, questions do arise as we finish through these presentations. So if you wouldn't mind, I just had a couple questions here regarding the water fund, which is really important to me. And I know it's important to a lot of the constituents. So I want to make sure I ask my questions as he's on that topic. Is that okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So Ellen, going back to that last chart that you presented there. So you did ask a very important question. We don't know why Clovis's rates are a lot less. But in previous slides that you presented in our workshops, I did notice that their rates were a lot higher in other enterprise funds, such as sewer, or possibly the other enterprises. So at the end of the day, when we look at these particular rates, my question to you is, you said that the tier rates are not justifiable, especially with that third tier. So the second tier would be justifiable, and would that keep us away from any legal litigation when you go through that second tier rate?
So, quite frankly, the easiest, the one that's going to be most defensible is the uniform rate. So you don't have a tiered rate to defend. Now we had legal look at their rates, and they actually had some costs that we had in tiered 2 that they weren't comfortable with as the basis in our earlier study. So that's one of the reasons our tiers got a little closer. So yeah, a lot of that is going to come down to perception, in terms of do they feel that's part of a second tier or not? What drives our tier 2 costs is our water conservation program. And so we assign the water conservation program to that second tier and figured, okay, those folks in the second tier will be paying more for water conservation. We also had some debt service in there in our first time through, and council felt a little uncomfortable doing that, so that was removed in the study you have in front of you.
Yeah, thank you, Ellen. I think it's important to note that, you know, when it comes to these rate studies, the city in the past has obviously tried to increase these rates, and I think it's in due to just deferring the projects or the capital projects that needed to deliver services to the ratepayers. And I understand that years back, I think there was several capital projects that were projected but have not been completed, and I know that adds added cost. So the fact that there's a 3% increase and then you're good for 5 years, you know, wow, that just tells me that had it not been for those American Rescue Plan dollars, we'd be facing a lot higher tiers. And again, it's just kicking that can down the road and not taking the bull by the horns and trying to get this thing situated. Because I think essentially water, being that it is a scarce commodity, will continue to increase in price. And for our municipality, especially a small municipality that draws very little acre feet of water in comparison to the county around us, you know, we actually are the ones that have to pay for that. So I kind of like the idea that if you waste more water, you pay a bit more. I know that might not sit well around here. I don't like the third tier rate, but certainly the uniform, well, like you said, I think it allows folks to take advantage of it a bit more. And at the end of the day, I think you pay a higher bill. So anyways, those were my comments. I just want to confirm what justifies the second tier versus that the uniform.
Yeah, and you know, in a lot of communities, you might see tiers that are based on having to bring in an imported water source, for example. You know, I've had some clients that have had 3 different water sources, and those tiers were based on, you know, having to use a more expensive source of water each step of the way. That's not the case here right now. And, you know, down the road, as Sigma gets enacted, you know, over the next decade, you may see that, but you don't see that now. So in this particular case, you know, the water conservation program really is the one differentiator that goes into tier 2 that tier 1 folks wouldn't pay for. But again, when you go to this slide and you look at even, let's look at the average monthly bill here at the 2,200 cubic feet. You know, the tiered versus uniform, the tier to be paying $72.44 versus $70.66. I'm not sure that really sent a conservation signal. You know, so as an economist, you know, when we did this in the past, you know, again, the state would recommend almost, you know, a doubling each time you went forward, you know, to try to get a price signal. I'm not sure you get a price signal for the difference we have here.
Yeah, thank you. And last question I will ask is in regards to the operations and maintenance. I don't know if you have a figure there, but you know, when the rate study came into question at one time with the initial rate hikes, you know, salary came about it. Is there a percentage that we know what of what the salaries and that are paid off of these enterprise funds? Do we have that by any chance?
Well, the salaries that are in the enterprise fund and paid for that are all paid here. I'm not sure if I understood your question.
What I was getting to is salaries are paid from different funds, right? I mean, obviously they're charged from different funds to the enterprise. I wasn't sure if there was a number or a percentage of what that amounts to. in comparison to the total expense.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so that I don't have that in front of me in terms of that percentage. So there are some shared services. For example, the city manager, that type of thing. Some communities allocate some of those costs across enterprises. And so I don't know what that breakdown is. That might be something that Anthony might have to come back with, but
That would be something I in the future. I didn't mean to throw you that curveball. I just wanted to ask if there was numbers that show that as a percentage.
I don't have that as a percentage. I have what was allocated to the water, the wastewater, the solid waste, so we have those dollars. What I don't have is what they call a cost allocation plan that looks at some of those shared costs and how those are spread across the enterprises.
Thank you, Ellen. Appreciate your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on water while we're doing water? Okay, I'm going to jump ahead here again. Oops, getting way ahead of myself. Okay, so on the sewer enterprise financial plan, kind of the same thing. Now this is different in sewer because one of the things in the water, you actually had reserves that were built up. You didn't actually build the CIP, but you had collected some of the dollars, and that kept things down. So when we actually looked at how we allocated the rescue plan funds, we needed to put more in the sewer side because they didn't really have reserves there. And so we've used more of the rescue plan funding in the sewer side. Oops, sorry, quick finger. Same type of chart here where we look at the fiscal years across the bottom of the graph. And then the blue is O&M, the yellow is debt service, and then the green is cash fund CIP. And so you can see that there's really not much new CIP going on that's paid for cash, except for the stuff that's got paid for by the rescue plan. So that really saved us here. So you can see on the wastewater side, that same line, that solid line, being pretty straight for the existing revenue. The dotted red line shows where our revenues be adjusted for rates, shows we're collecting a little bit ahead here to pay for some of those future capitals. And then that gray line shows what rates would be without the Rescue Plan Act. Because again, that was $16 million that we were paying for capital there. Now, the current rate design for sewers is fine. And the volumetric rates based on your average monthly winter use, January through March. And that's how we figure out. It's a good proxy for wastewater flows because there's no irrigation. If you look at the rates here for residential, a minor increase out of the chute, but then going up about 5% a year moving forward. So you can still see that in the multifamily. Now the multifamily actually had, as we had here, it jumped up a little bit because it's, when we compared the water use, it was a little bit higher there. So you can see that actually there's a little bit of a narrowing between single family and multifamily. And so, and that's just again because the flows projected were higher than typical and what was used in the past. Now, if we go to the table that has the non-residential fixed and variable monthly charges, you can see the fixed charge for commercial going from 19 to almost 22.82 and then moving forward. And then you can see some of these charges varying. We spent more time looking at typical strengths for these things, and so we see bigger changes in the high-end juices there, and also in the light folks. So like when you're going through there, your grocery and mortuary and your restaurants, those are your high loadings for BOD and suspended solids, and they would pay more volumetrically opposed to those that didn't. So a little more variability than you had in the past there. Looking at your sewer rates, now these have really gone up over time, and you can see, going from just under $21 in 2011 to $42.75 now. Proposed would tweak that up there. Now, if you compared that and just said, hey, if it was just CPI only and the 2068 represented everything you needed to do, then it would be 26. So I'm not sure that gives you much context, because these rates are what they need to be. Now, if we look at the bills here, again, the fiscal years across the bottom, and then looking at two rates there. The yellow is where the rates would be without the ARPA, and the green is with it. And you can see, not a huge change initially, but going up about 5% a year from there. But you can see from ARPA that really saving your residents a tremendous amount of money there. And then if we compare this, there the single family residential, you can see we're kind of still in the middle of the pack. Again, I'm not sure why Fresno or Visalia are as low as they are, but you compare with Merced and Selma and others. And then if we took water and sewer and added them together to see where you are, there was some comparisons there. So combined, we approach close to $100 a month for water and sewer combined. Again, there's some communities that are substantially lower, and Turlock and Selma being higher. We're pretty close to the Clovis and Tulare, but again, this is where we just compared the typical user. So this is my last slide on sewer. Any questions on sewer? Okay, and then we'll do storm drain, and that'll be quick. So it's a small enterprise fund. There's really not very many expenses annually, and we're keeping the real simple rate structure. Now, as mentioned before, right now, what you see here is really just operating expenses going up. But city manager talked about looking at potentially adding some CIP on here. And if that's the case, then we'd need to adjust these rates. But because you can see right now, we're projecting a little under 800,000 a year that would be going up closer to 900,000 over the study. And if we added some capital improvement projects there, you can see that would have a pretty immediate bump to the rates. And again, these are the rates themselves. We have a pretty big jump from $2 to $2.81, and you can see correspondingly how that goes through. Again, still not huge in the overall scheme of things. And then historically, if we'd just stuck with the CPI, for example, since 2011, that $2 would have been $2.54. Now, quite frankly, the math, we probably should have went back to 1991 or whatever it came in and had what the CPI was for that one. So that's it for solid waste. Any questions or on storm drains? I'm gonna now we'll jump to solid and let Greg do the presentation, but I'm going to control the slides. So, okay, we're in solid waste. All right, Greg, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah, if you can run those slides. So hopefully it helped to get the report. I know last time we did this presentation, you really didn't have any draft report to go through, but I think that report documents most of the background, kind of explains a little bit more about what's going on in the system. In one way, solid waste is much simpler than water and sewer. In some other ways, it's more complicated. Same Prop 218 process as for water and sewer. So we'll say, it's probably good to send all of the water, sewer, and the solid waste Prop 218 notices out at the same time or in the same packet. So the differences, obviously are that Mid-Valley does the operations and the city basically just, it serves as a contractor. So there's some overhead and admin costs that the city incurs. Yeah, and then I think when we were starting the study, the SB 1383 was just beginning to kind of break the surface and people were beginning to find out really what this was. It is a huge imposition. I know the talks we've had with Mid-Valley, they were saying something like the impact on cities in California was something like $3 billion of additional costs that we're all going to hit at the beginning of this year. So that's been one of the biggest issues to deal with. And since the negotiations between Mid-Valley and the city have not concluded, to my knowledge, the best we can do is go with some estimates of about how much these new programs would cost. So we're thinking about a 35% surcharge, which is about $2 million per year. And then as mentioned before, Arnaldo mentioned that street sweeping costs, which, you look back on the rates and the per front footage, how some of those got created in the first place is kind of a mystery to everybody, but we think it makes a lot more sense to incorporate that in with the solid waste rates. It's a relatively small bill, so that's being incorporated and kind of spread over all the customers. And then the city's admin fee, there is a $2.33 per residential customer that the city was paying, but they weren't collecting from the residential customer. So that's now included in the rates also. So in the financial plan, this is just like water and sewer. This is where we, look at all the details of different categories of costs. The one big difference with solid waste is it's really an equipment run and manpower run utility as opposed to a large underground infrastructure treatment plant kind of facility. So the capital costs aren't real big, but the equipment costs and manpower costs are really the main things. The costs, as we looked at the costs, they break down annually. They break down about 70% for the Mid-Valley contract, about 18% for transfers out to interfund charges. Those are the overhead allocations to other departments. 8% for street sweeping costs, and then 4% for city salaries and benefits. So here's hopefully we've had some issues with the clarity on some of these tables. Hopefully this is better, but this is the kind of the full scale. It's actually a summary of all the different accounts, but it kind of rolls up all the different costs by sources and uses of funds, and then the total, as Alan explained before, the net revenue requirement is what you need to recover from rates. That's after you take the total costs and subtract non-rate revenues. Things, because of accounting issues, this 5.397 million down at the bottom, that reflects the fact that the rate increases aren't going to be in effect for an entire year. So if we have accountants in there that are looking at comparing one year to another, there will be some little differences like that. But this, basically just shows you what, if you look at this line, the first gray line, surplus deficiency before rate increases, that's, with no rate increases, that's what your deficits are going to look like over the next 5 years. So that's not a good projection. You obviously need to do something. That's a lot of cost to cut if you don't have any rate increases. So let's go to the next slide. So the operating reserves or the reserve funds for solid waste are also much simpler. There really is no capital improvement reserve. There's no revenue bond reserve. So, basically everything is held in this O&M fund reserve. And the amounts in this is typically much smaller than the other two utilities. There's just not that much to cover. Mid-Valley does most of the operations, so there's not too many things that can happen. Obviously, this goes a little negative for a couple of years, but that could only be fixed with higher rate increases, and we feel like there's enough to get by from year to year, and then you end up at the end with your reserves being pretty healthy for solid waste. So some of the key assumptions, the three-part methodology that Alan talked about, the financial plan, the cost service analysis, and then the rate design. There's key assumptions that go into that cost allocation process that we rely on. And since the city doesn't have direct control over the operations, we worked with Mid-Valley, and so staff in Mid-Valley were really pretty good on kind of getting some overall assumptions that would work for, how should rates be done. To be honest, the difference between what the city pays on a customer by customer type basis pays to Mid-Valley versus what they charge the customers in the city, there is quite a big difference between there on some of those rates. And there's really no explanation why. It's kind of like this was created a long time ago. Nobody really knows what is around that knows how they were created or exactly what went into them, but they've just kind of gotten skewed over the years. So there are some cost of service adjustments. But in general, 2/3 of the revenue should come from residential, and about 1/3 or 34% should come from commercial. That's kind of the bigger picture of how the costs are incurred, as Mid-Valley does these operations. And then with the 34% for commercial, 26% or 26% of the 34 is for commercial bins. That's the biggest customer class, and 8% are from miscellaneous other commercial services. So those 26 and 8% add up to the 34% for commercial. In terms of overall costs, based on the number of tons collected by the entire system and the tipping fees that are paid, that adds up to about 20% disposal related costs. The rest are going to be collection related costs. So that's another key assumption in the analysis. And our landfill disposal costs, which obviously is a big part of that's 20% of or a big part of the 20%, is $28 a ton. And they do have some different disposal options. They're saying this is about the weighted average that they're paying for waste that they dispose of from City of Madera. And then, obviously the biggest, from my perspective, the biggest piece to look at and adjust is the number and size of containers and the number of pickups per week. So there should be correlation between the sizes of the containers and how many times you pick those up per week. And, what are the cost efficiencies of picking up the same container 3 times versus 1 time? all those kind of things factor in here. So you're probably getting tired of looking at tables with numbers, but this is the total annual revenue by customer class. So including the street sweeping and the 35% surcharge, you see highlighted down there, about 7.8 million is the total. And current rate revenue, if you look at just what the city is collecting for each of these customer classes, is about 5.8 million. So obviously there's a big difference there. Part of that, or the biggest piece of that, is the 35% surcharge is a little over 2 million. So as a result of the cost service analysis, there were changes in how we allocated all the costs, all the different types of customers, and all of this factors in the number of customers at each service level in each bin size. So this is a very detailed analysis, probably the first time something like this has been done at the city. But the result was that for the basic service, without adding on all the additional things that weren't being collected or maybe should have been collected but weren't, there's actually about a 20% decrease for the residential customers. So the current rate is $23.22, and the basic cost for that same component, that same service, is $18.58. As we mentioned, that the city was actually collecting more from the customers than they were paying to Mid-Valley for residential services. And commercial services actually the other way around. They're actually collecting less from customers and paying Mid-Valley more. So that kind of gives you an idea of, some of these rates they're just kind of off. They need to be adjusted. So when you look at the 1858 being the new cost of service rate, then there are these other things, as we said, the admin fee, which is only for residential customers. That basically was an agreement with Mid-Valley for Mid-Valley to take over some services, including replacing containers when they wore out. So that was $2.33 a month. That's now being included because the city's never collected that from residential customers. The street sweeping charges come out to about $1.54 a month for residential customers. And then those costs are kind of spread over all of the accounts equally, so there's some are bigger, some are smaller. But the benefit of street sweeping is not just for the front footage in front of somebody's home or their business. There's a lot of streets that and other areas, public areas, that are benefited from street sweeping. So we just feel like this is a much more defensible and more rational way to collect the street sweeping charges. And then the big part that we've been talking about, the AB 1383 surcharge for single family, that comes out to about $7.69 per month. So that's a basic service charge added on to the residential bill for that. And then in commercial, you're going to see some big jumps in here. And as I said, a lot of that is that the city was actually paying Mid-Valley more than they were recovering from their customers. So you're starting with an artificially low rate, and then the actual cost of service, something that really has not been looked at very closely over the last 10 or 15 years. There are adjustments there. So for example, the most common bin service, 2 cubic yards collected once a week, there's like 180 customers that have that service. That jumped from $52.11 to $146.72. And that's about the only way we can cut that. The costs are what they are, and if you try to justify getting this $52.11, based on everybody being charged for the same for disposal and the same type of service for the pickup and the collection, it just doesn't. It's just way undercharged. That $146 is the new cost of service for that type of service. So this is a kind of a breakdown. I think last time there was a little bit of confusion, like what are all these parts? You know, how do they add up? And so this is a comparison of current rates versus the proposed rates. On the left, you see the 2322 is the current rate. And then if what the 233 is the admin fee that was not being collected, and then the street sweeping charges of 234, all of that adds up to 2789. And then when you start with the proposed rates of 1858, add on those different pieces, there is a rate increase per se. This is just, you know, the additional rate revenue we need to collect from all the customers. And that's 7% per year. And then the AB 1383 surcharge is the 769. So that adds up to the $32. And overall, you know, apples to apples, that's a 15% increase. And given that we're building in a 35% revenue increase for SB 1383, you know, it could be a lot worse than that. So here's the solid waste rate schedules. As you see, for this is where most of the customers, the vast majority of residential customers are this first 3 standard containers. So they're going from $23.22 to $32. There's fewer numbers of these miscellaneous other charges. Multifamily has different rates. After the first 2 dwelling units, the charge goes down a little bit. So for larger apartments, it's, you know, most of them will be at the lower rate. Commercial for 2 containers, just standard residential containers, yeah, that went from $29.46 to $42.21. And then there's miscellaneous other things. Carry out service, there's not many of those, but go to the next slide. We'll see this comparison. So this just shows kind of like that previous slide, what the differences are between your current rate. If you add in the street sweeping and the surcharge, what does that get you for the top rate, including the admin fee? So, you know, this kind of fixes a lot of problems. This should provide the basis for adjusting the rates the city pays Mid-Valley for these services. So I don't know what the status of talking to city council. You guys are one doing the negotiating with Mid-Valley, but so I don't know what the result of those negotiations are, but at some point I'm sure you have a new contract and some of these numbers may be different. So let's go to the next slide. And then the same thing on the commercial. You've got the proposed with the street sweeping and the surcharge. This is where we're seeing the significant differences. Not all of them have this big of a difference, but these are pretty significant just because we broke things down on, you know, we're going to charge the same for a ton of commercial waste as we are for a ton of residential waste. You know, the vehicles are basically the same. We look at the you know, the costs as Mid-Valley experiences them in their collection process, and these are just the hard, cold facts that this is what it comes out to. There's quite a difference there. So yeah, and then similar to what Alan was showing, the historical rates. You know, if you look at the jump to 32. Well, all the years that there were no increases, if you just added 3% CPI, you know, you'd be at closer to $38 or $39. So that's kind of the historical perspective and kind of what happens when you just you know, don't address inflation and rising costs over the years. So some of the other recommendations, you know, eliminating the current differences between what the city pays Mid-Valley and what they charge the customers. That's an obvious one that as soon as we started looking at this, at some point contract negotiations will be done and we'll have some more solid numbers to work with. And And it's possible that we've been kind of hinted at that, the 35% might end up collecting more than you actually end up negotiating with the Mid-Valley. From our perspective, the way Prop 218 works, the cities are always allowed to adopt up to what is approved under the Prop 218 process. At any point, you can reduce those rates. You just can't increase them above what you have. So, it's kind of like it's better to be safe than sorry. You don't want to go through the Prop 218 process again. If it turns out that negotiations end up saving money over what we're projecting, those rates can be adjusted anywhere downward from what we're proposing. So next slide.
Oops, hang on.
Yeah,
sorry.
So this was a joint effort. This is just taking the standard single-family residential bills and combining them so that you can see what all of them together. So because water and sewer weren't not that much, most of it came from that red-haired stepchild, the solid waste fund. So from 122.78 up to 133.31. And so the next steps, this probably applies to water, sewer, and solid waste. Alan, did you want to go over this or?
Sure. So basically, since this is a workshop, you'll still have to, the staff will have to return to council for more formal action. And again, we can complete the rate studies with any comments that are made and get that done. Bring that back to you, and then ultimately the council will have to approve the rate studies and the proposed rates, and that means for the water side, picking what you want to move forward with, whether it's tiered or uniforms. And then you'd start the Prop 218 process, and that you'd have to mail notices out and then set up a hearing date, and that can't be any sooner than 45 days after the mailing. So depending on when you want to get this in, the quicker we do this, the better. And then the rate approval will be requested at the public hearing if no majority protest, or for storm drainage, you'll need an affirmative vote. So from there, we can.
Yeah, were there any questions about the solid waste? I know we asked you to hold your questions to the end. So did anybody have any questions about that?
I do not see any raised hands at this time.
I have a question.
In the chambers, do we have anyone wanting to ask a question from my colleagues?
Yes, Mayor Garcia, I had one last question for Alan. I know you guys did a great job of providing us the charts with all the other municipalities and their current charges for water and sewer. Overall, I don't know if this is something you can provide, or maybe in the future, but to look at the bottom line is, I'm assuming that most municipalities have all of their utilities all in combined bill. And, when it comes to waste and or drainage, if you combine all those four, you guys did a great job of providing us what that cost is. Where do we stand in comparison to other municipalities? The reason why I say that is because most of our constituents here and other figures in our community look at what does it cost bottom line for that person, the cost of living here versus in other municipalities. Are we that much off? Is it a couple dollars? Is it 40? Is it 50? And why I say that is because when we look at the median incomes in our community in comparison to other municipalities that you're shown in your graph there, obviously you want to see that there's a comparison, that there's not a big, there's not a big deviation from the average rates, so to speak. Because the cost of providing these services, I feel that the city in the past did not account for inflation, it did not account for the CPI, and because of that, now we're paying for a lot of this here, and we're having to stick it to our constituents. These are hard decisions to make, and I'm sure they're going to vote on this. But overall, looking at that picture, it really serves a purpose for these constituents or even other investors looking at Madera, what the total cost is. I'm not sure if that's something that you were able to gather.
So when we do these studies across every community or agency has a little bit different things, right? In some cases, they are having to replace infrastructure. In some cases, they're newer communities, and the developers, they've had, as part of the development, had a lot of dedicated utilities that, they had the developer pay for. And so, just the background in terms of the communities is so different. It's hard to do it. I would say, as an economist looking at it, I don't see anything in your utility charges that would raise any red flags in terms of any businesses or anybody else coming into the area. I mean, it's very comparable to what we see across the valley.
Thank you, Alan. That certainly answers that question. Again, just trying to be as transparent as we can for our constituents. I think when they look at these workshops, obviously the bottom line is always what most people account for. So I appreciate the fact that you were able to put those graphs and show us the differences between these municipalities. And again, thank you for presenting to you and your team.
Thank you.
I have one question.
Are there any other questions from my colleagues?
I got a question, Mayor. This is Councilmember Montes.
There you go.
This is for Alan. So that final figure that we had that showed the current overall bill, that was utilizing the standardized water rates, correct?
You mean the 122 versus 132?
Correct.
Yeah. I'm not sure if we had the tiered or the proposed in there. Actually, Jordan, do you recall on that one? But regardless, it would have been within $1 one way or another. So not a huge difference for the typical user between tiered or uniform water rates.
But in that final graph there, for the water, it is showing the uniform scenario.
Thank you. And then I guess my next question would be for staff. So what clarification or direction do you need today from us? So I know definitely it was the standardized versus the variable rate or the tiered rate. But what other direction or clarification did you want from council today?
I think this evening it's a workshop. I think this provides an opportunity for council to provide any feedback, any questions. At the same time, we're still working through a couple of relatively minor issues through the storm drain system. Again, we're examining some potential localized flooding that we have. For longtime Maderans, we know that we have a couple of hot spots in our community, and we're taking a look at those. If council this evening did want to provide any direction, we would be more than happy to take the direction. With that being said, though, no pressure. It's a workshop. It's an opportunity to put all the information out to the public. It's an opportunity for council members to speak with their constituents. At the same time, it's an opportunity for city staff to share the information with the community in case they want to go online or in case they want to take a look at it. And if they want to provide feedback, we welcome the feedback from either the community or council at this point. Again, if council wants to provide direction, we would be more than happy to take it. Again, if we're not seeing a tremendous amount of heartburn by council this evening, what we would do is we would go back over the next couple of weeks. We would finalize a study. We would come back to council for formal action to start the formal Prop 218 process. Going back to what Alan and Greg said, the other moving part are the ongoing discussions with Mid-Valley. There's a lot of moving pieces to this entire thing. If you're only doing a Prop 218, it's challenging. We couple that with AB 1383. You couple that with ongoing discussions. There's a lot of moving parts, and so we're trying to compartmentalize them a little bit. But at the same time, they're all interrelated, and there's very blurry lines between all of them. And we're trying to do our best to try to keep it as orderly as possible. And the great part for us is we have a great consulting team, and so our team's been excellent as well. but again, there are some moving parts here. But so the next step, again, can no pressure to provide feedback unless council kind of would like to.
Mr. Rodriguez, it might be advantageous to put up that last graphic where you said about next steps, and that I think explains some of the unfinished business that we have at hand. Mr. Hightower, you have that graph, not the graph, but the.
Yeah, let me get that to you here.
There you go. Once rate study is complete,
yeah, so once you have a rate study that you can post, because you'll want to have a report that you look at, and then, as part of the 218 process, you'll want to post those rate studies on your website so people can see those. And they'll want to, as soon as those mail out dates go, you'll want to have that available to the public. So yeah, other than a couple things that we talked about on the storm drains, we're very close to having everything done. It'll be pretty quick to finalize those reports, so those can get turned over pretty quickly. And then once we have the council meeting and got the approval, then the next step will be drafting up what the Prop 218 notice actually is, and get that set up and give ourselves some dates, because we'll want to list the public hearing date in that notice. And we'll work with your attorneys as well to make sure that everything has been noticed correctly and had that done well. So, and then once we get that out, then you get to the public hearing date, and that's where people are going to come in and, for the most part, you don't see too many people show up that are going to be in support of a rate increase, right? You'll usually have the majority of the folks show up to protest, but even that's not going to be probably a lot of folks. So
yeah, I'm waiting for the presentation on the rate decrease.
So Arnoldo, at this time, can we look for staff to finish up negotiations and formalize the rate increases so that we can take action on the whole package?
So I think at this point, Mayor, we would continue on the rate study, and we would have a parallel track with Mid-Valley. I don't believe that we have to complete both of them at the same time. I would recommend completing the rate study prior, because again, the fees can always be lowered but not raised. I think based on the discussions we've had with Mid-Valley to date, it sounds like their rates are going to be within the boundaries or within the thresholds identified by NBS. But those discussions continue, and we'll try to be sure that they're comparable, so we're not coming back to council and saying, "Oh, council, we have to increase them and we have to restart that study." And so that's the goal, is to make sure that we're close. But at the same time, we may not be 100% complete, because those are ongoing discussions, and as council's aware, that too is a fluid situation.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I may, Arnoldo, so at what point would the staff come back and provide some recommendation based on these studies, as far as, and more specifically to the enterprise funds such as the water and sewer? Because the way I look at it is that no matter what way you go with a uniform or a tiered, it's inevitable that the rates are going to go up. I mean, if you hadn't had the American Rescue Plan dollars, I mean, again, we saw it based on those charts, the cost of it and the obligations are far exceed, the revenues. So we have to, at some point, increase those rates. So is staff prepared to make a recommendation at this time as far as what option would be best?
If council were to ask staff right now, what option would be best. I think it goes back to what I recall, if I believe Alan indicated this, the uniform is the most defensible. There is an opportunity for extreme water conservation. The rates may be a little bit lower. However, in terms of defensibility, the uniform is probably the more appropriate one. With that being said, in terms of next steps, if we continue at the pace we're going, we could potentially come back to council within 2 weeks or the second meeting in February, once we finalize the Prog 218 studies, and we would come back to council unless council has heartburn this evening to say, hey, staff, we don't like anything. You need to go back to the drawing board. I'm not hearing that just yet. I don't think anyone likes some of the information that we're receiving. But at the same time, I believe council understands that things are going up. Fortunately for us, we received $23 million, and we're allocating at council's direction to these studies, which is going to mitigate some of the increases that you saw.
Yeah, and maybe for you, Hilda, I mean, I heard the term, it's defensible. I mean, is that, would you say with this 2-tier, is that something that we can justify?
The two proposals are cost justified. As Alan said, the difference is nominal. So even though they're both justified, there again we've talked about that perception of tiered rates, but we had this reviewed by an expert water attorney, and there were adjustments as a result of the first review, and what's before you includes those adjustments. And so with what's before you, the attorney has advised that the tiered system is cost justified. But again, with laws and lawsuits, you can never guarantee anything.
Yeah, thank you. I just think that over the years, that's been pounded on us quite a bit, that you know, these are not well, I don't say the word constitutional, they're just not justifiable. And we have to have a leg to stand on when we propose these. I'm certainly in favor of conservation. Obviously, when it comes to water usage, I feel that there's no reason why I should be paying more if my neighbor's using a lot more. I feel that, yeah, you know, obviously those increases happen with uniform as they do with the tiered. But again, I guess this will be a conversation we'll have once staff has a recommendation and we can come back with the formal decision. But thank you again for the presentation, and thanks to staff for all their time.
Any other comments from my colleagues before we move on? I believe, Mr. Rodriguez, that we will wait for your staff recommendations, hopefully within the next 2 weeks. Mr. Hartier, you and your staff, thank you very much for this very detailed report.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we are finished with our workshops. We will now move on to the consent calendar. Item B, matters listed under the consent calendar are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion and one vote. There will be no separate discussion on these items. If discussion is desired, a member of the public or a member of the council may request an item be removed from the consent calendar, and it will be considered separately. Alicia, do we have any members of the public wishing to speak or make any comments on this item?
No, Mayor, we do not. Mark, do we have any callers on Zoom or members in the council chamber? Or, I'm sorry, any guests in the council chambers?
There's no one on Zoom.
Thank you very much, Mark. I will now close
Mayor,
public comment. I will ask for any discussion or changes to the consent calendar by my colleagues.
Mayor, can we just clarify that there is no one present at the other 3 venues where the city council members are? And if there aren't, we don't have to worry about asking for public comment from those venues. Just to clarify, I suspect there are none, but just to clarify.
Yeah, I think that would be good. And in the future, if we could make that clarification at the beginning, if there's no change to that, then yes, we can definitely leave that out. But as long as we make that clarification at the beginning.
Yeah, there's no one on Zoom right now, and I'll chime in if somebody pops in and wants to speak.
And, and no one from Ms. Gallegos at Ms. Gallegos' site? Anybody at Ms. Evans' site? No one, and no one at your site, Mr. Mayor?
No.
All right.
So then we will now close public comment. And again, I said, as if we have any, do we have a motion from my colleagues?
I still move to approve the consent calendar as presented. I second it.
Motion by Councilwoman Gallegos to approve the consent calendar, second by Councilwoman Evans. Alicia, would you call the vote?
Councilmember Gallegos?
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Yes.
Councilmember Montes?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Evans?
Yes.
Councilmember Mejia?
Yes.
Councilmember Villegas?
Yes.
And Mayor Garcia?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
I need to pull this up. Hold on a second, Alicia. We will now be moving on to item C1, public hearing regarding annexation number 10, Omni subdivision into Community Facilities District 2005-1 and related actions. I will now open the public hearing regarding the annexation of territory to Community Facilities District CFD number 2005-01.
Mayor, I declare that the notice of public hearing was published on January 8th, 2022.
Staff, would you please now proceed with your staff report?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Gary Conti, Planning Manager, and I will share my screen for a PowerPoint presentation on this particular item. You have a visual of the PowerPoint?
Yes.
All right, here we go. Again, this is the initiation, it's the proceedings for the annexation of the Omni subdivision into CFD 2005-1, referred to as annexation number 10. Bear with me a little bit, I do have a slight cough, to say the least. For those in the audience that may be here, a little refresher, and as well as to our new council member, I'm going to provide some background as regards to the CFD itself and that of the annexation properties. CFD 2005-1, the purpose of it is to basically levy an annual special tax to finance, in our case, police protection services, fire protection, suppression services, and park maintenance and storm drainage system operations and maintenance. The CFD, in essence, was formed for the purpose of funding the gap between the revenues that we do generate for new development and the cost of delivering those actual services desired by our public. When the CFD 2005-1 was formed, in the initial assessment at that time was $311 for a single family home. It has now basically grown to nearly $500 in the current fiscal year 2021-22. The tax is basically that's collected is deposited in our general fund, since the impacts are basically specific to the general fund, and the utilization of that tax is purposely broad, such that the city may finance any services or facilities permitted to be financed underneath the Act, and I described those particular services a moment ago. The annexation in question is identified there in blue, highlighted here by the circle in gold. This is the area in question. It consists of 2 parcels, and it represents the annexation of 2 parcels I mentioned, and occurred with a tentative subdivision map that was approved in 2019 for 61 single-family lots. And that part of the conditions of that tentative subdivision map required the annexation into this particular CFD 2005-1. As you can see, it's at the southwest corner of Ellis Street and D Street, and this is the 61 lots as it's configured on that particular property. If you recall, on December 1st of last year, I mean, it's odd to say that, but 2021 just now passed us, the council approved a resolution basically declaring the intent to authorize the annexation of this particular territory into the CFD district, the CFD district number 2005-1, and setting this particular date, January 19th, 2022, for special elections for considerations of financing. So what's before you now, and the recommendation made by staff is, 1, to hold this public hearing, and after its closure, then adopt the following resolutions, and there are 2 resolutions. The first resolution, in essence, is to authorize the annexation of the territory into the CFD 2005-1, again referred to as annexation number 10, and basically authorizing the levy of a special tax and submitting that levy of tax to the qualified electors. The second resolution is basically calling for the special election and submitting the voters of annexation number 2, which consists of one entity for both parcels in question, into CFD 2000-5, and the propositions regarding the annual levy of that special taxes within that annexation number 10 to finance police protection services, fire protection and suppression services, park maintenance, and storm drainage system operations and maintenance within the district. And I know that's a mouthful. The second step, such if that is successful, is to conduct a special election of the qualified electors of that annexation and annexation number 10 into the CFD district itself, and making a declaration and certification of the results of that action. And so one ultimately is they would be adopting a resolution, making certain findings and certifying the results of the election and adding the territory identified as annexation number 10 to Community Facility District number 2005-1. That concludes my presentation, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions from my colleagues at this time?
Excuse me.
I now open the hearing to protests, comments, and questions from interested parties, including the public. Alicia, do we have any public or written comments at this time?
No, Mayor, we do not. I declare there are no written protests were received by the city, that there were less than 12 registered voters within the Community Facilities District, that written consents to holding the Community Facilities District elections today have been received from all landowners within the proposed annexation number 10, and that I concur with the holding of the special election for annexation number 10.
I now close the public hearing. Is there any discussion from the council? I see no hands raised. Since there is no discussion or questions regarding this item, is there a motion to adopt the resolutions 1 and 2 from my colleagues?
Mr. Mayor, I move that item C11 and C112.
Second.
I second.
Was that you, Mr. Villegas, on number 2?
Yes.
Motion to pass items, resolutions 1 and 2 by Councilmember Rodriguez, second by Councilmember Villegas. City Clerk, can I call on you to conduct the election, please? Excuse me, do we
Mayor,
have to
would you
call a roll
please,
vote?
excuse me, Mayor, can you do the roll call for resolutions?
Yeah, that's what
1 and 2
I was just asking Alicia to do. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Gallegos,
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez,
Yes.
Councilmember Montes,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Evans,
Yes.
Councilmember Mejia,
Yes.
Councilmember Villegas,
Yes.
and Mayor Garcia.
Yes,
Motion passes unanimously.
thank you very much, Alicia. Alicia, I will now call on you to conduct the election.
Thank you, Mayor. One ballot has been received. I now close the election and announce the results as to annexing the property under annexation number 10 to CFD number 2005-01. We have 1 yes vote and 0 no votes. I declare the annexation passes unanimously. Council, you may proceed to consider adoption of the resolution declaring the election results.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion from my colleagues to adopt a resolution declaring the results of the election?
I so move.
Again.
Motion by Councilwoman Evans, second by Councilmember Villegas to adopt the resolution certifying the results of the election. Alicia, and adding the territory in annexation number 10 to CFD 2005-01 has passed by a vote of 1-0. Would you call the roll, Alicia?
Councilmember Gallegos,
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez,
Yes.
Councilmember Montes,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Evans,
Yes.
Councilmember Mejia,
She stepped out.
Councilmember Villegas,
Yes.
and Mayor Garcia.
Yes.
So Mayor, Councilmember Mejia just walked back in.
You could call her name.
And Councilmember Mejia, for the record.
Excuse me, how long was she out?
About 5
If she was,
Roll call.
About 5 seconds. When roll call started, she stepped out and she just walked.
all right,
She was
okay,
present
then.
for the entire presentation.
Just clarifying for the record, thank you. So the mayor has a prerogative to ask, to see if Councilmember Mejia wishes to vote on that item.
Yes, she was not out that long, so yes, I believe she was involved in the report. So I think that yes, she should be able to take a vote. Alicia, would you add her name and call for her vote?
Councilmember Mejia.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you for being on top of things, Hilda. Thank you, Alicia, for that. We will now move on to item D, petitions, bids, resolutions, ordinances, and agreements. I believe item D1 is the establishment of cannabis business tax rates. I believe, Mr. Rodriguez, you have this item?
I do, Mayor. Thank you very much. With me this evening is Dave McPherson from HDL. So as council is aware, the city council has adopted numerous resolutions and ordinances to allow for the sale of cannabis within the city of Madera. One of the last steps to do is to establish the cannabis business tax rate. Council may recall that the voters in November of 2020 voted to approve Measure R, which establishes the ceiling for the maximum cannabis business tax. It does not establish the floor. The floor is the prerogative of the council, and that's the item we'll be discussing this evening. So again, the voters approve the maximum. Council has the discretion to do anything up to the maximum that the voters approved. You cannot go above and beyond what the voters approved. You can go lower. So in preparation for this study, staff reached out to numerous cities around this area. The one thing I can tell you is that communities treat it all a little bit different. So on the retail side, the cities that we surveyed that have an established tax range between 4 and 10%. City of Fresno at the lowest at 4. City of Coalinga was the highest at 10. One thing that we noticed though, that they do vary. The other item worth noting is that some communities do not have established taxes. Rather, what they do is they use the development agreement route. For those council members that were here back in May of 2020, that's a discussion that we had briefly with council, and the agreement was that we would not go the development agreement route at the time, that we were going to put it before the voters. Cultivation varies as well. Some charge per square foot, others by a percentage. It's kind of all over the board. One thing that we attempted to do very early on is we tried taking some of the industry standards and some of the trends that we were seeing at the time. So table 1 is provided in the staff report, and I broke it down into a couple of slides. The first slide, I attempted to show some of the cities. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, and every one of these is a little nuanced, but rather what we attempted to do is capture some of the key points. So for example, on the top row, it's the city. What do they generally charge for retail, cultivation, distribution, manufacturing, and testing? And on the left-hand column, you will see the different cities. One thing that I will note is that I had a potential applicant reach out today and say, well, Riverbank doesn't charge 10%. We have a development agreement with them. And I shared with them the email we actually received from the city of Riverbank that indicates 10%. So again, there are some nuances to every one of these. It's not very, it's not a one size fits all model. That's where I'm going. So probably the most, the closest community to us, which one knows the city of Fresno just across the river from us. That's one city that we looked at because they're just a little ahead of us in terms of the process. On the retail side, they have 4%, cultivation $6 per square foot, distribution 1%, manufacturing 4%, and testing 0, which means that they're not testing or that they're not charging for the testing. Some of these communities, when you reach out to them, one thing that they'll note is they'll say, this is our rate today, but we're examining it. Some will lower it, some will raise it. These numbers are reflective of what was happening in December. So it wouldn't shock me if someone were to reach out to one of these cities and they're already considering a modification. So again, this was a snapshot on the day we reached out to those communities. Some of the other cities, again, their development agreements. This list is not exhaustive. We simply try to capture kind of what was happening around our area. And Oakdale is a little further north, and Sirius is a little further north, but at the same time, they're still Central Valley communities. So we attempted to capture that. So for the benefit of the council and the community, the middle column there, it says maximum rate approved by the voters. This did go to the voters. And at the time, the voters voted $10 a square foot maximum for exclusive artificial lighting, $7 for a combination of natural and supplemental lighting, $4 a square foot for no artificial lighting, and then nursery $2 a square foot. Staff is recommending the right-hand column, which would be $6 a square foot, which is the same as Fresno. And then the combination goes to $4 a square foot, $2 a square foot, and then $1 a square foot. And then this one captures testing labs, which is the top row, retail sales, the second, distribution of cannabis, manufacturing and processing. So again, the maximum rate approved by the voters, you'll see just going down 2%, 6%, 3%, 4%. Staff is recommending slightly lower numbers at 1%, 4%, 2%, and 2%. One of the things to note, if you were to take a look at staff's recommendations, they are very comparable to the city of Fresno. That's one of the challenges because, as this council is aware, I know Councilmember Montes in the past has used the phrase strategic advantage, and that's one of the challenges here. I think we want to position the city to have an advantage. The challenge at the same time, I don't think any of us want to leave any money on the table because of the benefits to the community. And that's one of the challenges here. So we want to be reasonable, but at the same time, are we better off having $1 than no dollars? And that's one of the things that staff tried weighing. And at the same time, we huddled with our consultant and who's an industry or who's a subject matter expert. And these are some of the rates that that we were considering. Probably the one that's going to receive the most attention, I highlighted in red, that's retail sales. And that's probably the one that's going to receive the most attention. When cannabis first started, if council may recall a number of years ago, some cities were charging 15%, 10%. They've slowly been lowering. And again, City of Fresno is at 4%, and that's why staff is recommending 4%. Council always has the option of going lower. At the same time, you have the option of going higher, but you cannot go above the 6%. So staff's recommendation this evening is to adopt the resolution establishing it as set, as proposed in the staff report. It would be prudent for me to know that there are some cities that have different criteria. So for example, if you have a large grow, you will have a set price for the initial, hypothetically 10,000 square feet or 20,000 square feet. That's set at one rate. There's scales of economy, so anything above that, you go lower. There are some communities that do that. That's an option for council. So these are staff's recommendation. Again, this was largely based on what's happening around us. With that being said, though, it's council's prerogative to provide any feedback. And if council wishes to see some potential alternatives like a sliding scale, like you do see in some communities, then we would be more than happy to go back, sharpen our pencils, and come back to council. But again, there's lots of different ways of doing it. And so with that being said, I'm gonna ask Dave if I missed anything or if there's anything that you would recommend.
Mayor and City Council, this is David McPherson. So I think the rates that staff is presenting to you as recommendations, a good starting point is, as the city manager indicated, you can go up or down. At this time, since we don't know what the universe of number of applicants, what we're trying to incentivize the wholesale businesses to come into town and what their potential are. Once we have the applications, I think we have a better assessment of identifying this for your consideration to see what the impacts of those rates are going to be for those businesses at this time. But since those are good prices in not only your region, but for the wholesalers, remember, they're not locked to where they're moving their product up and down to compete. So it's important that they be able to be competitive related to that. But as we've done more and more comps of looking at the different activities and what are some of the pain points, we believe those are good starting points until we have further information to reassess it. That could be 2 years down the road when we know what the total universe of industry is in the city.
Thank you. I will now open public comment. Alicia, do we have any public comment, either written or spoken from the public on this item?
I do, Mayor. I have one written public comment. Give me one moment while I pull that up. Okay. I'm writing this email as a formal proposal for council consideration as an alternative to the staff recommendation. As you know, I have been planning the development of Cannabis Business Park. Phase 1 of the business park will consist of an approximately 50,000 square foot building that will house 23,000 square foot of cultivation space using artificial lighting, as well as a nursery, distribution, and manufacturing. At full build out, which at this time would consist of 9 additional buildings in the park, we are planning to have over 200,000 square feet of cultivation space with other facilities to meet market demand. I ask the council to give consideration for all startup businesses in Madera, both retail and non-retail. I propose 1 to 2.5% of maximum tax to be collected at the anniversary of year 1 and year 2. This will give startups breathing room for the considerable cost of opening a business in Madera, giving your local businesses a greater chance of success and long-term viability. As businesses get established, a greater tax rate and burden would not impose the hardship and risk that frankly and discretionary tax does at the beginning of a business. A new business must have reserves to offset lack of income, and a relatively high initial rate will increase reserves that will require greater capitalization and cash reserves that are not directly related to the cost of production. I thank you and the council for your consideration. Edward McIntyre, Landmark Real Estate. And that is all of the written public comment I have received, Mayor.
So there are no more written comments, or are there anyone in the, okay, again, we don't have anybody. I will now ask for, or no, I will now close public comment on this item. I will now ask for a discussion from my colleagues.
Mr. Mayor, we do have several people here at the chambers, and they're wishing to speak.
Okay.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. My name is Rico Saldivar, speaking on behalf of Mainstream Madera, prospective cannabis business from the city of Madera. I'd like to address a topic that's slightly off this topic in regards to the points for local owner applicants based on section B 1-8 of the city ordinance for cannabis. Per the labor equity diversion plan in section B, local owners are able to obtain up to 400 points having met the criteria. I simply wanted to clarify that these points are available for local owner applicants, whether they're applying for an equity license or for any other type of cannabis license. We ask that these points be considered to carry more weight for us local owner applicants, representing our companies and, more importantly, representing the city of Madera.
Mayor?
I'm going to address that, Hilda. I just finished processing that in my head. I was waiting for a comment on the tax structure. And so I would ask the speaker to keep their comments regarding the tax structure that we have in front of us, and any future comments by any members of the public or members from the council, limit their comments to the question of the tax structure.
Okay.
So if the next person, and also Mark, could I have a visual of the podium if people are going to speak? Because right now I don't have that. So I don't know if there's people in the chambers who are wanting to speak on any item.
The cameras are automatic and they're based off of people's mouths. And so unfortunately with masks, it's throwing the cameras all off.
Okay. All right then. So in the future, Alicia, could you notify me if there's going to be someone stepping up to the podium? I would appreciate that, because from what I'm seeing on my screen, I don't have that. So if there's a speaker that's next, could you please step up?
Mr. Mayor, I can help you with that. I don't know that Alicia can see that either, but I can certainly help you with that. There is another speaker coming up.
You finish your comment?
It's not finished.
I mean, as it relates to the item that we have.
Yeah, I felt that it was important because it is still relative to cannabis. This was a topic that I haven't heard anybody speak on yet in terms of any of the meetings that we've attended. And I just felt that it was important to voice that opinion and concern that we feel it is very important for us local business owners going into this business cannabis. We're very much in tune to the community. And I think we've proven to the community that we have full intent to reinvest back into the city of Madera, and these points are very important to us, our company.
Mayor, maybe you can just recommend to the speakers that they certainly have a right to speak at the beginning of any meeting concerning an item that's not on the agenda. But right now, the only thing that's on the agenda are the tax rates. So at the next meeting, members of the public who wish to discuss that aspect of points have the right to come in and speak, or to call in and speak.
Thank you, Hilda. Completely understand. Appreciate it. Thank you for letting me speak. Have a good night.
Mr. Mayor, you do have one other public comment.
Good afternoon, Council, or good evening, actually. After looking at all of the slideshows, I see that we do need to make a decision with this cannabis tax dollars today. I'm hoping that could happen today. We have some deficits, as you see on the charts there, that need to be filled in the tax dollars revenues coming in very quickly. I hope that we could push this along and get these percentages agreed upon with everyone here today. I'm hoping also that we could get a workshop started at next meeting so we could get these applications started and submitted. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any more speakers?
None that are coming up to the podium at this moment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that, Councilmember Rodriguez. I will now close public comment on this item. And I will now ask for any discussion from my colleagues.
I have a question.
I don't see any hands raised. Is anybody in the chambers who wishes to speak, or Councilmember Gallegos or Evans
Councilmember Montes has his hand raised.
already?
I'm flailing over here. The camera won't pick me up either.
Flailing. Yeah. Go ahead, Mr. Montes.
So I guess I have a question for staff. I do like this as a good starting point. You know, we talk about giving ourselves a strategic advantage, but you also want to give your businesses a competitive advantage. You know, that's gonna help them out. So setting that tax rate where it'd be competitive to the surrounding areas, I think it's going to be a really good starting point. My question would be, you did mention something about a sliding scale, and I think the commenter did have kind of a similar question. Is that something that we would have to do today, or that, and that, you know, I'm in favor of moving forward with what we have, but would that be something that we would have to do across the board, or would that be something that we could accomplish with a development agreement if it sets lower?
Well, I think my recommendation would be for council to provide staff with direction, and we can come back at the next meeting. My recommendation would be to avoid the development agreement because it adds time on the back end. And one of the challenges with the development agreement is they're excellent for certain types of projects, but in a case like this, I think we would want to try to treat the applicants as equal as possible.
Okay.
And I think as long as we put the rules out there with the sliding scale, I think that's appropriate. There are a lot of community. Oh, actually, I'm not just sure if I could say a lot, but there are some communities that use a sliding scale, and that's what the written comments had indicated or alluded to.
And your comment was where once you hit a certain threshold, the additional canopy space would be taxed at a lower rate.
It would be taxed at a lower rate traditionally because the inspections, there's scales of economy when you're going out for inspections and paperwork, and that is one benefit, or that could be potentially be an incentive for someone to incentivize them to grow their business.
Okay. So this would be, I guess this would be a good starting point to move forward. And then, you know, we can evaluate, like this, Mr. McPherson said, what we get in terms of applications. And then I guess what he's saying is that if we need to make it more enticing, we can do that. I think is what his point was. So, I mean, I'd be in favor of moving forward with staff recommendation today.
Councilwoman Evans?
Yes, I'm in favor as well as in moving forward. We would be coming in below Fresno, or we're running concurrent with Fresno?
We would be coming in almost identical to Fresno. In terms of retail and cultivation, the nuance would be on testing. Fresno currently does not charge for testing. In Madera, staff is recommending 1%. However, on the manufacturing, Fresno is at 4%. Whereas staff is recommending 2%. So I think the key two ones in terms of retail and in terms of cultivation were the same. In terms of some of the other ones that are probably, I'm not going to say as popular, but those are not some of the questions that staff has received. We would be 1% higher in one, and we would be 2% lower in the other. So we would be very comparable to Fresno.
Seeing no more hands raised, I would recommend that we accept the staff recommendation as to moving forward on the tax rate. I believe that they would be favorable to us, and as been stated many times, we could always address this item in the future after reflection.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you. Arnoldo, would you be able to put up that?
Councilmember Rodriguez, can you speak a little louder, a little closer to the mic?
Should I take off my mask?
No.
I don't recommend you do that.
No,
just speak louder to the mic.
Arnoldo, can you please pull up the chart that shows the comparable cities? And a question for you, Mr. McPherson. In looking at the chart that shows Coalinga, obviously that's a little bit higher than what all the other comparables are. But, you know, I think we're late in the game. This initial, the proposition that passed back in 16 obviously gave a lot of cities an advantage. And I know that we compare ourselves a lot to Fresno. So the question for you, Mr. McPherson, and maybe staff is, are we strategically are we competitive? I mean, because we are comparing ourselves to a city that's, I mean, I want to say 5 times bigger, if not more. But what's the competitive edge here that we would provide to, let's say, retail or non-retail? I mean, I see that the rates are there in comparison to Merced. I mean, they came in 2018. We're now in 2022, and we're starting to come into this game a little late. But we're also wanting to pull some revenues in these types of retail and non-retail business. So I just want to make sure I pose this question to my council, my colleagues: is are we at a competitive edge here in comparison to the rest of the cities that have already established something before, 2-3 years before us, with the exception of Fresno?
Mayor, I'm more than happy to answer.
Absolutely.
Rodriguez. Okay, thank you. So, one of the unique things that you have to keep in mind, and we'll start on the retail side, is that businesses will create business models to what's going to benefit them for maximum revenues. So the rates that we provided you for a recommendation to start on the retail side, keep in mind that if the business model is 35-40% is deliveries, and I have multiple locations, I am going to do my deliveries out of my lowest tax rated facility. So it's kind of like an Amazon, kind of think of it that way. So if I'm at 7% in Merced and I'm at 4% U, then I may strategically try to maximize deliveries from one facility versus another one in my market share in order to make that revenue increase. The second thing is that we don't also want to encourage people to use out-of-town deliveries to come into town because of the higher tax rate that you may impose here. Even though you can impose it on the out-of-towns, you have a more difficult challenge to enforce it, and even some that are doing deliveries that aren't even being monitored. So the goal here is 2 things: is kind of get the business up and running, get market share, good branding and good branding for their products, and then making sure that they're going to be sustainable, because people are not going to find a better price point at another jurisdiction surrounding it. So for the retail side, that was kind of part of the strategic component of that. The second part of it is the consumer yourself. So as your community is purchasing this product, keep in mind that they have a 15% excise tax on top of the sales tax on any product we're buying, so that you would be driving a price up for your own constituents. And so making sure that they're paying a reasonable amount for a product is kind of a dual role for you as a council to consider there. On the other activities on the rate, same kind of thing, is that we do have a saturated market on some of these rates that you see at our higher amount. People are competing against a lot of other businesses now, that it comes down to, if they've got margins as far as what they can sell their product to, and the taxes and the excise tax at the state level puts a burden on them. And when we did that tax presentation many months ago, we talked about that pain point as a total cumulative tax rate of 30%. So the rates that we provide you kind of reflects how you keep that vertical tax rate under 30% for all taxing activities that are going to be within your jurisdiction. And so we set those rates to try to reflect that in the current trends and in this competitive market, where some of the earlier movers have not moved from that yet because they haven't felt the impact of them. But as more and more cities come into play, they're going to start losing their market share, and those businesses and those other agencies are going to be struggling to compete with those that have the right price point to move their products.
Thank you, David. And in your experience, aside from the retail, on the non-retail, have you seen that become an issue with folks getting started on those enterprises only because of additional costs and what have you? I know that we had a comment earlier in relation to possibly reducing the amount to help them offset. But what's been your experience with these non-retailers?
So on the non-retailers, it's going to happen no matter where you're at. It's your ability to get a product to market. So if they do have a good product and a good relationship with retailers, and as more and more retailers expand, we do, as we talked about in the past, we do not have enough retailers in California. So they're still competing for that. We think the rates that are here are very sustainable. It doesn't matter if they're competing someone from all the way up north, all the way down south. These rates are very competitive on the rates for them, as you can see reflected here in this chart. And in many cases, even people they're competing with, the rates are even higher or consistently a little higher than what you have here. These rates are very, very attractive for most people, not only to encourage businesses to come to Madera, but to make them sustainable to this point. With the caveat is that on the cultivation side, the tiering thing is something to consider, but as I recommended to you, we need to know what the whole universe is, your total, especially when you're going to have all the potential verticals. We don't know if you're going to get 4 vertical businesses or you're going to get 20 vertical businesses. So all the projects altogether, I think, will need to be evaluated to consider the benefits of both reducing it rate by tier and or the number of businesses that you have in town once the application process opens.
Thank you for being thorough, David. Appreciate that. Thank you. And
you're welcome.
Thank staff also for their presentation regarding these tax rates. But it seems to me that overall, when it comes to the cultivation and the manufacturing distribution, we reduce the amount of costs because we're trying to keep them here in a vertical type of a business, right? I mean, we're trying to incentivize them to keep their businesses here by, starting off at a $6 a square foot, then lowering that down to, let's say, $4 a square foot for combination, and manufacturing and distribution with the lower percentage. Is that kind of the tactic?
That's correct. That's correct.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that, David.
Are there any other members of my colleagues that are wanting to ask a question here, either here or in chambers? If not, then I will now ask for a motion from my colleagues on item D1.
I move to approve D1 as presented.
Second. I second
Motion
it.
to approve item D1 by Council Member Montes, seconded by Council Member Gallegos. Alicia, would you call the roll, please?
I believe that second was by Councilmember Evans.
That's correct.
Excuse me, Mayor Pro Tem Evans, did you make a second on that motion?
Yes, I did, Mayor.
All right. Alicia, would you call the roll?
Thank you. Councilmember Gallegos?
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Yes.
Councilmember Montes?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Evans?
Yes.
Councilmember Mejia?
Yes.
Councilmember Villegas?
Yes.
And Mayor Garcia?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. McPherson. Mr. Rodriguez, we will now move on to administrative reports. Item E1 is a request by the Greater Madera Kiwanis to assist in the 4th of July community event. It's a recommendation. I believe we have this item by Chief Lawson.
Thank you, Mayor. This is going to be a tag team by Chief Lawson and myself.
All righty, proceed, please.
I will share my screen. So the reason that both Chief Lawson and I are going to be discussing it is because when the item was originally presented to the city, it was for assistance by the local Kiwanis Club to have the police department waive fees for 4th of July celebration. With that being said, there's a couple of other components. So we thought that it would be appropriate to combine it into one single report, which is it was provided to council. So as in terms of background, the city of Madera has historically hosted a 4th of July fireworks show. To my knowledge, The fireworks show, going back 30 years, used to be at the fairgrounds. It was moved over to County Country Park for a couple of years. And then after that, it was moved to the Madera Municipal Golf Course on Avenue 17, which is owned by the city. The fireworks show historically was hosted by the Parks Department. The last time the city hosted it was in 2017. At the time, for Parks Department staff only, the cost was slightly less than $60,000, $25,000 of which went for the fireworks display itself. The city would hire a professional pyrotechnic company that would come out and organize the event. In 2018, the city did not host it. And then in 2019, which was right after my arrival, I didn't feel that the city was in a position to make a recommendation to council to bring it back. And since then, we've had COVID. And so kind of pumped the brakes on a lot of things for a lot of us. That being said, the Kiwanis Club has approached the city and a couple of other local agencies and said, we would like to host the 4th of July celebration. And so the discussion started, and one of the things was can the city assist in waiving the cost associated with the police department, which are roughly $2,700 for that one day. The event right now, tentatively, and again, this is very tentative, is scheduled between 5 p.m. and 10 p.m. And then also the question becomes is how involved is how involved is the city with the event? The one thing before staff got too involved, we thought it would be appropriate to bring it to council. The Kiwanis Club has not formally requested a financial contribution in terms of a check. However, I believe it would be appropriate for the city to participate. It is a community event. The Kiwanis have expressed a desire to keep the cost to the community at a minimum. We also understand and know from personal experience that the past couple of 4th of Julys, we have seen an influx of illegal fireworks. Does that mean we're not going to have them? Probably not. However, we also know that a lot of people in our community do not have the means to either purchase fireworks on their own, or they don't have the luxury of going up to Bass Lake or the coast to see some fireworks show. So we think this is a great community event. And again, before staff became overly committed to the cause, which we think is a good one, we did want to bring it before council to get some direction. At the same time, in terms of staff's role, that's still not completely clear. However, staff is more than willing, and we would be happy to assist the Kiwanis in organizing the event. So again, I'm sorry, I said $2,700 for police services. It's closer to $2,900. So again, some potential other areas that the Kiwanis have expressed some assistance on is developing some promotional material, where the city is very fortunate that we have some high caliber individuals that have the ability to put things together. Transporting spectators via the city bus system. Right now, there's a discussion about potentially using the Matilda Torres parking lot, and we would bus people in. The principal reason for that is for a firework display show, you do have to have clear area, so some of the parking lot would be unavailable to spectators. Potentially identifying and contacting firework display companies on behalf of the group, designating city staff to carry out kid-related activities. In the past at the golf course, the city would have bounce houses and face painting, and I'm not just sure what other events, but those types of events, just overall program development. And again, yet to be determined financial assistance. So the formal request this evening is to waive the city police services in the amount of roughly $2,900. However, staff would also request direction from council before we got ahead of our skis and overly engaged. So the financial impact to the city right now is $2,900. Again, some of the cost they can be absorbed by the city in terms of promotional activities. And then again, the Kiwanis may potentially request financial assistance. That's yet to be determined. As an alternative, council can always establish an amount and say, okay, this is going to be the city's contribution. That's another alternative that the council may consider. So with that being said, that concludes staff's presentation, and I'll turn it back over to council.
Thank you very much, Arnoldo. And I mean, I meant no disrespect regarding calling, but if you look at each item on the agenda, there's usually a name associated with the report. And I always go by that unless someone like yourself will notify me. But at this time, I'd like to hear from Chief Lawson if he would like to add anything.
Well, thank you, Mayor. As you know, the city manager and I go back and forth with mic time. So I appreciate you allowing me to have a few moments here. This event, as we all know, the 4th of July, when we stopped having these, increased calls for service regarding illegal fireworks. It does tend to sound like a war zone in our city. The distress to animals, the elderly. I do believe we have this event. It will allow our citizens to gather in an area, and it should lower some of that illegal fireworks and distress, because it'll be one area. Not only are the Kiwanis involved, but also the Lions and other groups. This is a huge undertaking, and I think it'll be very beneficial for our community. And going forward, I want to thank everybody involved in the ideas for coming up with this. But as the city manager had alluded to, before we went any further, we certainly need the blessing of our elected officials, the city council, the mayor, and mayor pro tem on this, if in fact you feel the way that we do with our presentation. So thank you with that.
Thank you, Chief. Full disclosure, I am a member of the Kiwanis Club. Mr. Rodriguez, if you would like to mention that fact also, council member.
I am, and I was going to allow for you to bring it to the council for discussion or comments, and I was going to make that. But yes, thank you. Full disclosure, I am also co-president of the Greater Madera Kiwanis, which is one of the which is the primary organization that's making this request. So Hilda, I'm not sure if that requires me to recuse myself. I did just want to provide some information in regards to the event. I think in the past, in one of the council member reports, I made that comment as well, that hopefully we'd get partnerships, and not only with the city, the county, and other service clubs as well, to bring this event here to the district fair. But I'll take your direction.
Mr. Councilmember Rodriguez, after we get our response from Hilda, then I'm going to open it up for public comment.
So, well, first of all, if recusals require, just a friendly reminder that you are required to recuse yourself when the item is called, and not even sit at the dais or wherever you are. Just a friendly reminder for next time. I am assuming, though, that in this case there is no financial interest that either of you would have. You do not receive any income or stipends or any compensation as members of Kiwanis. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that goes for you too, Councilmember Rodriguez?
That is correct. There is no benefit. It's a nonprofit organization, again, trying to bring the community together. But again, your direction is wise at this point, since we're not asking for any, well, I don't get paid by the organization. Would it be wise for me to continue?
Well, that's your choice, but you're not required to recuse yourself. You may participate from a legal perspective.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Hilda.
So then I will now open it up to public comment on this item. Alicia, do we have any public comment? We don't have any members of the public, correct, Hilda? As you said earlier.
Well, from the three venues outside the chambers, there may be somebody still in the chambers.
There is.
And
Mr. Rodriguez, is there anybody in the chambers?
There is one member, but no one stepping up to the podium for public.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for that. I will now close public comment and move on to a discussion from my colleagues.
I guess I can start here, Mayor. Again, I alongside Mayor Garcia belong to the Greater Madera Kiwanis, which is a local service club that's out there to help the community, benefiting in not only activities, but around scholarships, fundraising for helping our community. This event or this idea was brought because of the lack of a firework show that we haven't had for the last couple of years. I know in the past, the city of Madera has done a great job in promoting that at the golf course. Obviously, there's been some logistic issues there with parking and other areas of, I don't know, expenses maybe in regards to the staff. So we figured that this central location at the district fair would be easier to control, not only by police, because it's centered, you know, a lot of events happen here, like the district fair, Pomegranate Festival, and so many other events that take place. But the fact that it's in a controlled setting allows free admission for folks who come out, as a chief alluded to. And I know that Mayor Garcia is a big advocate of air quality. You know, when we have these illegal fireworks go off on the 4th of July, days before and the day of the event, you know, you see this happening around your neighborhood quite a bit. You start seeing more illegal fireworks pop up. And I think people are just anxious. They want to do something. And when you can provide a venue like this, where you can have these fireworks and this type of celebration, I think it brings people closer. It avoids them from trying to get out there and bring in more illegal fireworks. Again, that takes away from the cost associated with police trying to chase these people down. I think Chief Lawson can certainly attest to that, and I think he has in his report. So with that, this is why we came about it. We just want to see another celebration of our community come together alongside other service clubs. I know that we've invited the Evening Lions, and I'm yet to get a response from them formally, but I know that the Noon Rotary is also going to be involved in some way, in some capacity, but we expect that other partners come forth. And once we get set the date, today we expected to get something back from the city council so that we can move forward and get those flyers and that video going so that we can notify the community. But this will be a great event. Remember, it's not only for the Kiwanis, this is for the community in general, for all of Madera County, if any. You know, the district fair is a centralized location. So with that, I'm not sure if Chief Lawson or if Noldo want to add to that, but I also want to advise or full disclosure that the Kiwanis may be coming back with also fire services as well. So I know that we've been having ongoing meetings with some of these key staff members and other organizations, and their feedback has built this, and we're going to continue to do this. We have about 4 more meetings before this event comes to fruition. So thank you all for your help.
Council Mayor Pro Tem Evans.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to speak as a concerned citizen at this point right here in reference to the fact of being a dog owner. There are so many animals that are afraid. The veterinary is full of people going in early to get some type of a stimulant for their animals because of all the fireworks that are going. Living in a community, we see so many different fireworks shows. It's to the point where we don't even have to go anywhere because there's fireworks everywhere. And they go off days prior to and then weeks afterwards. So if this can eliminate some of the excess of fireworks, then it would be a great opportunity for the city as far as revenue, but also as far as a pet owner and just as a resident in a community. I just think that it would be something that would be absolutely great. So that's my take on it.
Are there any other members of my colleagues on the council wishing to speak on this item? Any more questions? And I believe I will ask for a motion from my colleagues.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion to approve by Mayor Pro Tem Evans, second by Council Member Gallegos. Alicia, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Gallegos?
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Yes.
Councilmember Montes?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Evans,
Yes.
Councilmember Mejia,
Yes.
Councilmember Villegas,
Yes.
and Mayor Garcia.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much, Alicia. Thank you, Chief and Mr. Rodriguez, for that report. We will now move on to item E2, seeking direction regarding the 2022 regular City Council meeting schedule. Mr. Rodriguez, I believe you have this report.
I do, Mayor. Thank you very much. Allow me to pull it up. This is the second time council has seen this item, and this would be the calendar year 2022 City Council meeting schedule. This item was initially presented to the City Council on December the 15th. However, staff inadvertently recommended to council the November 2nd meeting, believing that the election was the day prior. Going back to civics and econ, I think in the 4th grade is when they teach you that it's actually the Tuesday after the first Monday, and that would be the following week. So after that, we had recognized that on November the 2nd did not interfere with the election date. And so we feel it would be the prudent thing to do would be to have a city council meeting that evening. The other items that we took into consideration were holidays, League of California Cities, school calendars. We took a look at the graduation dates of Madera High South. Torres High School does not have a graduation this year because I believe they're sophomores, if memory serves me. And we looked at MLK. These are the middle schools, Thomas Jefferson and Desmond. Some of the schools did not have, they have not planned it out. However, the high schools did. And we noticed that our meetings on a Wednesday and their graduations are currently scheduled on Thursday or Friday, or they're in the morning, I think, for some of the, for one of the middle schools. The other two middle schools do not have them planned as of yet. And so with that being said, staff is recommending the calendar before you this evening. So 2 meetings in February, 2 in March, 2 in April, 2 in May, 2 in June, 2 in July, 2 in August. In September, we would go to a single meeting. The identified dates there, September 7th, 8th, and 9th, highlighted in a bluish purple color. That's the League of California training. So staff is recommending that we council that day, which would provide council an opportunity to attend the meeting. And then October 2 meetings, November the 2 meetings, and then in December the 2 meetings. This is a little bit different than last calendar year. Last calendar year, if memory serves me, I think we canceled three days, three traditional meeting days. This year, we did not have a meeting, the first meeting in January. So with that being said, that concludes staff's presentation, and I'll turn it back over to the mayor and council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Do we have any public in the council wishing to make a comment on this item, Elise?
None, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much.
And I have no written public comment, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Alicia. I will now ask for discussion. I will now close public comment on this item. I will now move on to discussion from my colleagues. Seeing no hands raised, I will now ask for a motion from my colleagues.
Excuse me, Mayor. Councilmember Montes does have a comment or a question.
Okay, Mr. Montes.
How did none of us catch that in November? Didn't catch it. That's my comment. Sorry.
Okay. Not everybody's up for election.
We don't plan that far ahead.
Is there any other discussion? No. I will now ask for a motion from my colleagues.
I move to approve item E2.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Rodriguez, second by Councilmember Villegas to approve item E2. Alicia, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Gallegos?
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Yes.
Councilmember Montes?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Evans?
Yes.
Councilmember Mejia?
Yes.
Councilmember Villegas?
Yes.
And Mayor Garcia?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much, Alicia. We will now move on to item E3, remote city council meetings under the Brown Act requirements of AB 361. Mr. Rodriguez, do you have this item?
I do, Mayor. Thank you very much. Allow me to share my screen. Council may recall that back on November the 3rd, Council discussed Assembly Bill 361. In a nutshell, Assembly Bill 361 was approved in order to try to mitigate the impacts of COVID-19. For about a year and a half, the City Council had remote meetings where council members were in the luxury of either their home or individual offices to minimize the spread of COVID-19. The state of California enacted Assembly Bill 361 that would allow communities to either continue to hold meetings remotely or as opposed to in person pursuant to the Brown Act. The City Council back in November elected to come back to person versus online meetings. With that being said, Assembly Bill does allow the city to meet remotely if approved by the council in 30-day increments. And so if the council were to decide to approve the resolution attached to your staff report, it would be valid for 30 days. So roughly, generally council has 2 meetings a month. So you can roughly say it would be good for 2 meetings. So in a nutshell, the Brown Act, the existing Brown Act, which has been in place for as long as I can recall, does promote remote meetings. The challenge with the Brown Act at times is an agenda always has to be posted 72 hours in advance. A teleconference location must be identified on the agenda, similar to this evening's agenda where we have 3 council members remotely. However, the location has to be accessible to the public. With that being said, a quorum of the members also has to participate within the city limits. So you don't necessarily have to be at your house. You just, the majority or quorum does have to be within the city limits. In contrast, the Assembly Bill 361 permits remote meetings. Similar to the Brown Act, the agenda does have to be posted 72 hours in advance. However, the nuance here is that agendas are not required to identify the teleconference location, and at the same time, the teleconference location from where a council member is meeting, it does not have to be accessible to the public. So in other words, if you're at home and you've potentially been exposed to COVID, or unfortunately, in the unfortunate situation where you may have COVID, you can continue to participate, but you can do it from the benefit of your home. And there's no requirement to have a quorum of the members of the legislative body to participate from within the city. So with that being said, council heard earlier this evening that our numbers are increasing, unfortunately, for COVID positive cases. And so staff felt that the prudent thing to do would be to put this on the agenda for discussion. With that being said, if council does approve it, we can continue to operate like we are today, which is kind of a hybrid model. We have some council members in the audience. I mean, here in the council chambers, we have some council members at home. However, the nuance there is that your home, the location of your teleconference that would not have to be added to the agenda. The benefit to that is sometimes we don't know when we've been exposed to COVID or if you have to quarantine. And sometimes you know 72 hours in advance and sometimes you don't. So with that being said, I'll turn it back over to the mayor and council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Do we have any members of the public wishing to speak on this item at the podium?
We do not, Mayor.
And do we have any written comments from the members of the public, Alicia?
We do not, Mayor.
Thank you. I will now close public comment on this item. I will now ask for discussion from my colleagues. I don't see any hand raised. Are there any member, Mr. Montes?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. I'm not gonna lie, I do like being here, and I've asked some questions about the makeup of what we can do and kind of self-policing. So we're expecting a lot of our employees to continue work. There's nothing that's really shut down in the city. Is that correct?
Correct.
Everything else is open. Restaurants open. People are going and participating and stuff like that. I just like having the option to come here and making sure that we're not excluded from being here because council and as well as the community. There are members of the community that can't access our meetings remotely. And so we're excluding them from participating. And just like before, I think, if I'm available, I'm healthy, I'd come. And I I don't know if this is a question for Hilda, I guess. Is there something that we can do that says, as far as council, we would be here unless there's some type of cause, right? Where either we're sick, we've been exposed, in keeping the permissions in place where we don't have to post 72 hours, don't, adopting this, but basically self-imposing a rule.
Well, in response to your question, first of all, AB 361 provides the flexibility. So you can continue, many cities continue to have their council meetings where certain council members elect to come attend physically and others do not. And many councils also allow members of the public to attend physically or not. And you pretty much have done that, except that you don't allow you did not approve the AB 361 resolution. So what that means is what happened today, that 3 members after the agenda or right before the agenda was posted felt that they would not be able to attend, and they had to post other venues where they would be calling in from, and members of the public could attend at those venues. As far as your question, as far as limitations on council based on medical conditions, I don't think that would be legally permissible to say that council members would have to say that they are ill or they've been exposed or any of that. That would be a medical condition. So I don't think that would be permissible for you to require that. So I don't know if that answers your question. Besides, how would you enforce it? For example, if somebody said, I have COVID, are you going to go enforce it? How are you going to go check their doctor certification? So there's really no way to do that. And so the best thing to do is either to keep it the way you've been doing it under the Brown Act, or to adopt AB 361, which allows you some greater flexibility to be there in person, either because there could be other reasons. You just don't want to expose others. You don't want to be exposed. You're feeling ill for other reasons, and you're vulnerable. And so AB 361 allows you that flexibility.
Thank you.
I don't see any hands raised. So I have been advocating for adoption of AB 361 since it first came out, so we could adopt a hybrid model. As I don't know how many people know, but we were exposed last week to COVID by a member who came into city council, and we had to scramble to cancel meetings, get tested. So allowing for us to be able to provide the community service of providing the services to our city by remote would be a great benefit to us. We would also, if we adopt 361, the boards and commissions could also have the possibility of meeting by Zoom. So this gives us greater flexibility. And I was hospitalized by COVID. It was not something that I would want to see on anybody. And I also have a grandchild that's 5 months old and cannot be vaccinated. And so anything that I can do to protect myself, my family, and friends, I'm willing to advocate for. So I would, and remembering that this is 30 days. It's not 6 months, it's not a year. We can continue to revisit based upon the information provided us by the health, our public health departments. So I would like to see us adopt this AB 361 law so that we can continue to meet as we have and provide all the services that we have to the community. And if you choose to be in council chambers, well, that's your right and you can do that. But I would rather see the hybrid model. Councilwoman Gallegos.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Garcia. Again, I am in favor of what my colleague is saying about that nothing is closed in our city. Nothing is closed. And our employees go to work. Our officers are opening up doors to windows to our constituents that they have no idea if they have it or not. We have our fire personnel going into homes not knowing if they have it or not. Our wastewater treatment plant, our water operators, all are showing up because we need water and sewer in our city. So if it's us showing up, I am in favor of that. If it's a hybrid where some of us have to be on Zoom for reasons that we don't need to say, I get that. But I think it's important as the leadership in this organization to show that and to show up in person. If we can go to the store, we can go out to dinner, if we can go to a family member's house, then we should be able to meet together in city council in the chambers. And that's how I feel. Thank you for that.
Is anyone in council chambers wanting to speak? I can't tell from here.
Mayor, Councilmember Rodriguez has his hand up.
Yes, Mr. Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Well, you know what, I think after the report that Sarah gave us today, I think it's imperative that we take measures to at least feel safe, especially for some of the members here. Obviously, we have 3 members that are not in today. Some may be for, whether it's medical, COVID, or whatever other situation. I think having that flexibility certainly gives us that edge. Obviously, I know that our civic duty may come into question, but we still have to do the meeting, regardless if it's in person or via virtual. I think, I see that a lot of the other commissions and boards that I belong to have this hybrid model and are accepting the AB 361 as a flexibility tool, especially in this next month with the numbers spiking up. I think it's important that we take measures. I understand the concerns stemming, whether you go to public events or not, but I think overall the council members should have a flexibility. If they do desire to come to the chamber, then do so. If you feel like you're exposed or you don't want to come out, then that's fine. Again, this is only for 30 days. We can bring this back, and at that time, if numbers are down, I think we can resume business as usual. But quite frankly, I think this is going to be the future. You're going to start seeing this a lot more often, and maybe not here at City Council. I can't say that, but it's going to happen with a lot more boards and commissions. And AB 361 is just the tip of what's going to come next. I think you're going to see more legislation to be more flexible when it comes to virtual meetings. But I'm certainly in favor for 30 days. In the past, again, this was brought before us, and I think we took a prudent approach. After we felt that things were safe, we came back to chambers and we're all here. But again, there's been some numbers and increases of this COVID. And I think it's important that we all have a flexibility to do what's right. So I'm in favor of moving forward with AB 361, bring it back within 30 days and we'll do it again.
Thank you very much. Mayor Pro Tem Evans.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. After receiving the information I came into the city hall right after New Year's, and I had come in contact and I scrambled to get a test. I came back negative. And then after coming to the meeting, I found out that someone had tested positive, and as well as I received information that night of the closed chambers that my aunt and my cousin had tested positive and I had been around them. So I received my test results today that I came back negative. Thank God for that. But I just feel that AB 61 will give us the grace to be able to decide one way or the other if we should come in or not. And none of us knows who, what, when, or how it will occur. And you don't know who you're around that may very well test positive and may not say anything. So for me, I'm in agreement with Councilmember Rodriguez. I'm in favor for the next 30 days to approve the AB 361. And that's my take.
Are any other members of the council wanting to speak out on this issue? I don't see any hand waving out in the background. Well then we will move to close this item. I will now be looking for direction from my colleagues.
I so move to approve AB 361.
Second,
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Evans, second by Councilmember Villegas to approve item E3. Alicia, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Gallegos,
No.
Councilmember Rodriguez,
Yes.
Councilmember Montes,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Evans,
Yes.
Councilmember Mejia,
Yes.
Councilmember Villegas,
yes,
Mayor Garcia.
Yes.
Motion passes with 6 yes votes and 1 no vote by Councilmember Gallegos.
Thank you very much, Alicia, for that. We will now move on to council member reports.
Mr. Mayor, if I
Yes.
may, and Hilda, I did receive a text from a constituent, Ramon Lopez, made a text that he did have a written communication for item D1. So that wasn't read, and I'm just now relaying the information. Not sure if that was something you wanted to put on the record before the end of the meeting.
So was that brought to your attention, Alicia? There was a written communication?
Mayor, after double checking the, I have a different mailbox, I'm sorry, and it went to that mailbox at 8:19. Not sure if we were on that item during that time, but I do have an email from Mr. Lopez.
Hilda, is it allowable for us to allow that to be read? Or,
Yes.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Okay, then yes, Alicia, would you please read that comment?
Thank you. Yes, from Mr. Ramon Lopez, please consider that in voters' mind, they already decided the tax. Please consider that regular sales price is 8.25%. Do not charge cannabis anything less than you charge to other typical products. And that would complete the public comment received, Mayor.
And that was under item D1.
D1, yes.
Okay, so that has been entered into the record. All righty, so then we will move on to our next item, which is council member reports. Item F, council member reports, announcements, future agenda items. This portion of the meeting is reserved for the mayor and council members to make brief reports on boards, committees, and other public agencies and at public events, to request updates, to initiate future agenda items, and to take action on matters initiated under this section of the agenda. Under this section, the council may take action only, on items specifically agendized and which meet other requirements for action. Hilda, clarification. Typically, we ask each council member to make their reports, but we do have item F1. Do we begin with item F1 and then come back to council members?
It's up to you, Mayor.
Okay, well then let's do that. Let's go ahead and do item F1, report regarding current elective mayor process. I believe, Hilda, you have this item, and then we will come back to the council members for their reports.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. This is the last item on your agenda besides your reports. Currently, the City Council, the City Council is voted by the voters, 6 City Council members by district every 4 years and 1 mayor at large every 4 years. So this report is responsive to a request at the last meeting that a report be brought back to discuss the manner in which the city mayor is elected and whether that could be reverted back to selection by the council, as well as consideration of reducing the term from 4 years to 2 years. And typically, most general law cities like the city of Madera do have a mayor selected by the rest of the city council. However, the government code provides for a process for the city voters, either by their own initiative or by an initiative put on the ballot by the city council, to decide whether they want to elect the mayor instead of having the mayor selected by his or her peers. And that is what happened back in 2010. The city voters decided to elect the mayor at large, and at the same time decided to have 6 districts. And that continues every 4 years with staggered terms for the council members. And that process is codified in your municipal code in sections 2-1.20 to 2-1.22. So with respect to the questions raised, there are 3 potential scenarios. There could be others, but I identified 3. One would be to, after your consideration and discussion, to retain the current process. After you discuss and you say, well, we really want to just go ahead and keep the status quo. That's certainly the prerogative of a majority of the council. Another option would be to retain the current process of electing the mayor and having 6 council districts, however, reducing the term to 2 years. And that is something that can be done. And the process would be for the council to place a ballot measure at a future election, asking the voters whether the voters wish to reduce a term to 2 years. I've seen it done the other way, where the mayor's a 2-year term and the council put something on the ballot to increase it to 4 years. So I've had that experience. And then the third option or scenario would be to consider repealing the elective office of the mayor. And what that would mean is that the council would be the one to select the mayor from among the council members. And that would be the reestablishment of the prior process. And then the council under this scenario would also be required to submit a ballot measure to the voters. And the reason for this in the prior scenario is because the voters previously voted on those procedures. So that's pretty much the way it works. It's by ballot measure. So the scenario that also impacts other things would be the scenario 3. If you do decide to proceed with changing the selection of the mayor process, then you would also need to, at the same time, when you present that ballot measure to the voters, present a the question of changing the number of council districts. So because the government code has different numbers of districts depending on whether the mayor is elected or selected by the rest of the council. So one of the things that's helpful here is that you're looking at this timely. If you do wish to proceed, there's plenty of time to pursue either option 2 or option 3 if you were to go down that path. And the reason for that is because a ballot measure has to be submitted not less than 88 days after the date of an election. So by August 12th, you would have time between now and August 12th to adopt a ballot measure to put on the ballot in November. There's also a June election, but from a practical standpoint, that might be cutting it too close because the process would be a bit complex, putting together the ballot measure and also the ordinance for changing the number of districts. And so if we were to do that, we would need to send something to the elections office by March, and that might be cutting it a little close. And there's your city manager has me working quite a bit right now. So could I do it? Yes, but it really would not make practical sense. It doesn't impact anything because regardless, if you were to take that either election and say the voters decided that they did want to change in that scenario, the mayor would still have the ability and the right to continue to fulfill his entire term in office, which would be until 2024. So there's no real reason to rush. But again, it's good that if you are thinking about something like this, to do it now. And so that's pretty much in a nutshell what it is. The other thing is to keep in mind is in the event something like this were to prevail, you would also have time if you had the election in November to then conduct redistricting. So you're undergoing a redistricting process right now. You've hired a consultant. You're going through that whole process. You would have to redo that because you would be changing the number of districts. So just something to also keep in mind. And as far as cost, there would be cost of an election, cost of staff time and legal time to prepare the ballot measures. And I can answer any questions you want. I thought I'd keep it short since you've had a long meeting tonight.
So I'm looking for any public comment on this issue from anyone in the chambers.
There's no one in the chambers, Mayor.
Thank you very much. I will now ask for comment from my colleagues. Mr. Montes.
Yeah, so since this was initiated by a member of the public, is this an action that can only be taken by council, or would they have an option to do that?
As I noted, a ballot measure can be processed by the city council placing a ballot measure on the ballot, or there's an initiative process where the voters could secure signatures and petitions, and there's a whole process. But yes, so it could be initiated by the voters directly or by members of the council, by a majority of the council.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see any hand raised. Is anyone else in the chambers who wish to speak on this item?
Mayor, and just for the record, we have no written public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I skipped that part. I'm looking for either comments or recommendations from the council. Councilwoman Evans, Mayor Pro Tem Evans.
Mayor, I recommend that we leave it just as it is. I mean, there's no sense in trying to rewrite the rule. If it was changed back in the day, we should just leave it as it is, because to have one person call in from one community to speak on an issue, if none of the rest of us are receiving these calls, and I mean, there's enough of us here, and if no one else is receiving it, then why even, break the wheel? If it's working for us right now, then let's just leave it as it is. And that's my take on it.
Are there any other comments from my colleagues? Councilwoman Gallegos.
Thank you, Mayor Garcia. I've received a lot of phone calls, texts, and people that do stop me. So I thank Hilda and staff for giving us that information so that I know how to relay it now. I know that information to give them. So I appreciate this information given to each and every one of us so that we have it in the back of our pocket. So when somebody has questions, we have that knowledge now, especially as elected and being the leaders. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Are there any further comments?
Mr. Mayor, I was just going to say, that as is.
Mr. Rodriguez,
yeah.
I think Hilda's going to ask you to put the mic closer.
Well, that too, as you saw me wave my hand I'm in my office by myself, and the lights went out because of the sensor. So I just was waving to put them back on. But yes, it would be helpful if you spoke a little closer to the mic.
Sure, no worries. I was just going to say, we leave it as is. I think that if there is an initiative from members of the public, we respect the democracy that we have in our city government. I think that if they want to pursue further action, that they can do so. They have that right to do so. But at this time, as far as I'm concerned, I think we leave it here. My recommendation is that we leave it here as it is.
I see no further hands. So I believe that we can close this item. And we will go back to council member reports. Councilwoman Gallegos.
Thank you, Mayor Garcia. I have several tonight. First, I'd like to say, Gary, thanks for being here tonight. I know it hasn't been easy. We have a couple of few more staff members that aren't feeling too hot, so hang in there and stay safe, you and your family. First off, I would like to really, with sadness, we lost this weekend Bud Smith, who is a resident since 1947, who is the founder of GPS. That is our hardware store here in Madera. Was a 2012 Lifetime Achievement Award recipient, and son Dennis does now still run GPS. So in the city of Madera, we are sad to hear the loss of him. We also had another loss. Senator Caballero's mom passed away this weekend, has been ill since October. So our condolence go out to the senator for her loss, and the city with sympathy for her from the city of Madera. And last, I would like to thank and recognize Council Member Rodriguez as being chair of MCTC, and now long as awaited to hand over his reign today to Supervisor Wheeler. So I would like to thank him for representing the city of Madera in that position. He did an awesome and excellent job, and I was honored to sit aside him into that role. So that's all I have tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I wanted to say thank you to Councilwoman Gallegos, and thank this council for supporting me, and also giving me the opportunity to serve as a chair for the Madera County Transportation. Certainly took that with honor. And again, it was a great opportunity for me to serve there. I hope to see that Councilwoman Gallegos reaches there too. Certainly has the support here of the council, and again, the appointment of the mayor. So thank you, Mayor, for that appointment. That being said, I just looking forward now to continue to wear my shorts and my slippers, kind of like Chief Lawson, as we start doing these remote meetings. But other than that, I hope everybody stays safe. I know that COVID is still very present out here, so I ask that you continue to just be cautious and take care of yourselves, take care of your family, and we hope that everybody goes through this unaffected by the COVID. I know a lot of families have lost a lot of loved ones, and my condolences to them as well. But other than that, just take care of yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Montes.
Congratulations also to Councilmember Rodriguez, and hopefully everyone's having a good 2022 or start to 2022. I know it's not the best for everybody with this variant, and hopefully everybody stays safe. And those are my comments.
Mayor Pro Tem Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say thank you to everyone from the staff. I know that it's been tough. You guys put in a lot of extra work. You guys do a lot of good things. There's a lot of COVID going on right now in our city, and please be safe. My heart goes out to those that have lost members of their families. And please watch out for your elderly, because it's hard. It's hard on them. It's hard on everybody. So please be safe. If you're going to the grocery store, which we have to, make sure you wear your mask. Order your kits, because now the president has, given an order that we can order the kits. I ordered 2 today for 2 different addresses. So I just want everyone to be safe, and I want to be able to see you the next time we do have another council meeting, whether it's at the diocese or if we're at home remotely. So God bless each and every one of you, and good night.
Councilmember Mejia.
No, I hope everybody stays safe and takes care of themselves. But I think that we should also be cognizant about the way we speak about COVID, and not to create any stigma. It's already very difficult with getting people to get tested, to get vaccinated, to wear a mask. So we should, especially as elected officials, be really aware about how our words impact, especially in our community.
Councilmember Villegas.
All right, there he goes. I want to address the problem of the graffiti. There were a lot of graffiti in my District 6 before the Christmas Day and up all the way to New Year's. So for Dina Dawson, Chief of Police, we had to patrol those. It's a lot of graffiti was during the holidays. And I don't like those guys painting the fences of the beautiful neighborhoods. So we got to try to, see if we can do better on that. And also I wanted to say, well, everybody, hopefully you can take care of yourself, stay away from make your distance and take care of yourself, use your mask and whatever you have to do in order to don't get the COVID and stay healthy and don't get it in any ways, so we can be better and stay healthy. And good luck to everybody. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you, the always dapper Mr. Villegas. I would like to thank my colleagues on the City Council for the hard work they have done in the past year. It's been a very difficult one, but you are troopers and you've done the job of serving the city. So I also want to thank the staff for their work. I would like to thank Mr. Rodriguez, our city manager, for taking the initiative and working with our staff to maximize the numbers of our employees who can work remotely. Of course, we have many staff who cannot work remotely and are working very hard to serve the residents of our communities. In particular, I'd like to thank and wish a happy new year to our first responders. My daughter delivered a baby at Madera Community Hospital, or helped deliver a brand new baby Maderan at Madera Community Hospital yesterday. So that was a very happy event for us, and a continuing education and being a nurse on her part. So I congratulate my daughter, Xiomara Russell, on doing that. And I want to wish everybody a happy new year. Thank you very much for all of that you do. I am an optimist. I think that 2022 will be a good year for us. So I look forward to that. We do not have any closed session under item G. I now call for adjournment. The meeting is adjourned at 9:36 p.m. I want to thank everyone for their participation. Lisa, could you help me out with the next meeting date? I didn't catch that.
Meeting date, Mayor, is Wednesday, February 2nd.
Yeah, I just saw that. Upcoming meeting dates: Wednesday, February 2nd, 2022, Wednesday, February 16th, March the 2nd, and March the 16th. Thank you very much, and you have a blessed evening. Thank you very much.
Good night. God bless.